Hang on, Siri. Hello, everybody. We are live today on the 11th of September, and the picture showing is of the Twin Towers because today is day. How many years ago is it now? What were we? 17. That's 16 years ago. This has just been put up for respect for that day. So Siri's has got a few pictures I picked up because it's a bit hard, isn't it? It's such a horrible day. What do you put up about 9/11? The picture showing. Oh no, my feed's coming through. Isn't that typical? Again. I was really crap about that, aren't I? Yes, Twin Tower Day. What to say? Much love to every American that had to go through that awful day. And yet again, more awful stuff with this hurricane and everything. So yet again, more hugs and kisses for the Americans. What a horrible day. I don't think anybody's ever going to forget that day, are they? I bet you everybody who's old enough knows exactly where they were on that day when this whole thing started happening. Anyway, much respect and a few moments there for America and America and America, it seems, rather, at the moment. Anyway, first of all, thank you to everybody who's in the chat room, everybody who's watching, and hello, Patricia. How are you, my darling? We've got series now. He's just unpresented himself. Patricia, are you there to say hello, my darling? Well, no, she must have just nipped somewhere. But anyway, Patricia's there from the UK. Series has chosen the topic of Video Club tonight. I have another group called Video Club, so that once a month, and then discuss the video of that month. Series chose this one, didn't you, Series?
Yeah, I came along this one, what is it, 10, 15 years ago, and it really stayed as one of the things what really intrigued me. And the Netflix actually could really place all the information, but yeah, with Flat Earth, at some point it actually is kind of line up because the nature of the universe is not really explained of how far that goes, etc. That's purely based on how the theories were in that time. But the actual step into the next step of what spirituality actually, in a sense, means through particularly his experience and his explanation of his experience, really intrigued me. And,
Series, you're not going to play the whole thing, are you? Going to play bits of it?
yeah, only the interview, and from 1.5 hours he steps into the more meditative layers of how the rest is built up, and that's kind of where I'm trying to get to with beginning with the square of all the data and how that works out through the sacred geometry. And eventually it's all based on the base form of the toroid field in combination with actually all the sacred geometry connected into it.
The whole idea of Video Club, isn't it, is to play this video and actually for the chat room to ask questions. Some of them might not even understand everything right now, so that's okay. But it's to ask questions or to discuss the topic that's being brought up by this video.
Yeah.
Series, do you want to play it?
Yeah, well, let's start it.
Good morning and welcome to New Heaven, New Earth. Last year, we did a program with Itzhak Bentov, a Boston-based researcher into the relationship between consciousness and the cosmos, and based upon a book that he wrote called Stalking the Wild Pendulum. This book has since become somewhat of a bestseller among people who are interested in the relationship between consciousness and the cosmos, and we wanted to, once again, get an opportunity this morning to speak with Mr. Bentov. Ben Bentov is a wonderful, loving, kind man, brave, courteous, true, all the other kind of things you can say. The interesting thing about him is that he has, over the years, conducted research into consciousness. The subtitle of his book is The Mechanics of Consciousness, and what we want to try to talk about today is one aspect of it, and that is the evolution of consciousness. Ben, there's probably no theory that has had more impact on Western thinking than the theory of evolution that Darwin came up with in the mid-19th century. And ever since then, all of our thought has been along the ideas that somehow we have evolved as human beings to being who we are today. So the question I want to ask you is, where do you see us now in that evolutionary development?
We can say that if we take Darwin's theories as being correct, then we know that we have evolved from the apes towards humans, and now we have finally come to a point where we're humanoid in shape, with vertical spines, we're reasonably intelligent, we can push buttons on TV, drive cars, etc., etc. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to draw maybe a little diagram, but don't worry, it's not very scientific. Let me draw what is called a bell curve, which looks somehow like this. It's being used in describing random events. And the way this works is the following, that if we assume now, let's take a following situation. Take a little town that has maybe 1,000 people in it. And we have this great desire to find out what the average height of people in this town is. And therefore we go out with a yardstick and start measuring these people. Well, we find that a very small, very few number of people will be, say, 3 feet tall. And a very, very few of them will be maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. The bulk of the population will be right somewhere here. That is the average or mean height of these people would be about 5 feet and 6 or 8 inches, something like this. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what we find here is that this bell curve gives us a good picture of where most of the population is. That is what typifies the population. We can use this diagram also to describe evolution. The bulk of the population today is this intelligent, more or less intelligent biped, all right? And with a vertical spine, and who pushes the buttons on TV and drives a car, etc., etc. Now, there is some backthrow. That is, there are some people here in this area, very few people who are still gorilla-like. That is, they're hairy, they beat their chest when they see their neighbors and a few other things. And then we have other people who are here in this corner, very few of them, who are very highly developed, because we say that evolution is now pushing mankind in this direction, away from the gorilla types towards the very highly evolved people. At this point, we're here. What's going to happen maybe 1 million years from now, 500,000 years from now? This curve is going to shift. It's going to shift like this. That is, the bulk of the population will be very, very highly evolved. We've gone away altogether from the gorilla types, no more gorillas. And what we have here now is the average man is now the retarded person in evolutionary terms. The bulk of the population is extremely, very, very highly evolved. And the cutting edge of evolution here, these are very, very highly evolved people. We can't even imagine what kind of person that will be. He may not have a physical body. What's the habitat, so to speak, of this group here? Well, you just go out and you find them. They're all over the place. The habitat of this group here, what do you think? What do you think you find these people here?
I suspect you would find them in universities. You'd find the people who are very bright, people who are in the leading edge of professions. It's an intellectual thing.
Well, I suggest that you find them in mental hospitals, in nut houses. And the reason for that is that these people, they live in a different reality, in a reality which is very changed, and few of them are adapted to live in this reality. So naturally, they can't function very well. So the only safe place, only good place for them would be the mental hospital, unless they can integrate their different view of reality with their daily lives. Now, if they can integrate it, then we have people like Newton, like Darwin, like Faraday. These are the so-called geniuses.
The thing that I'm not certain that we have talked about is, what is it that is evolving?
Let's put it this way. The nervous system is the thing that is evolving, and the nervous system is supported by a skeleton of bones and muscles and tissue, etc., etc. Now, the nervous system is that thing that gives us the picture of our realities. That is, our realities, that reality which you see all around you, the flowers and the chairs and the microphones and the teacup, is given to us by our senses. Yeah. We don't see light which is beyond UV and beyond infrared. We hear only a limited scale of vibrations, like, for instance, we hear anywhere from 52 to 20,000 maximum. Mm-hmm. In other words, all our senses are limited. So, for these limited senses, we naturally are seeing through a very narrow kind of tube or very narrow slit in the total reality there is. Mm-hmm. Now, as you're evolving, what happens is that slit opens up more and more and more. So you see more and more of that reality, and we assume that we see different realities. They're not very different realities, but not a very extended, broad view of one very large reality. The Bible mentions maybe 4 to 6 colors maximum. Yeah, that is what people saw just about maybe 4,000 years ago. Nowadays, we see hundreds and thousands of colors. That is, our visual system has evolved. Mm-hmm. Our fellow mammals, like cows and horses, see only black and white. So this is one example of the evolution of the nervous system. The senses are an extension of our nervous system. Our eyes, our ears, etc., are an extension of our brain.
So I see. Okay, so now, before you were talking about the people who were the mutants, either being in the mental hospitals or being geniuses. Yeah. These are people who have expanded perception, and hence they can see a reality which ordinary people at this stage of evolution are not able to see. Correct. What is the nature of that reality which they're able to see?
Well, that is classified as a non-physical reality sometimes. We can take an example, say, well, let's take a simple example. The family sitting at dinner table, and say there's a kid, maybe 15 years old, 16 years old, and he looks up and suddenly he says to his mother, "Hey, Ma, look at there's our dead grandmother is standing in the corner." Mother looks around, she says, "No, there's no grandmother there." And she says, "Well, kiddo, there's something wrong with you. You need help. You're crazy." So you're crazy. So she takes him up to the friendly neighborhood psychiatrist, and same thing happens. The psychiatrist will ask him, "Well, kiddo, what do you see?" Well, he'll say, "Well, don't you see, doctor, over there in the corner, don't you see this person standing there?" Well, the psychiatrist turns around, "No, there's no such thing." Well, and then psychiatrist says, "Oh, young fella, you're in trouble, and he writes a little prescription for Thorazine or electroshock or whatever, and pretty soon, in a matter of 2 weeks, kid is back in shape, very normal. No longer sees anything. Yeah. So the process has been reversed. This is called a psychotic episode or acute schizophrenic break or whatever it is.
And what you would say is that there's a good chance that that kid is seen.
Very good chance that the kid has a spontaneous opening of his senses.
So that the evolution has been rushed up or hurried up?
Yeah. Now, this actually happens. There are techniques to do this. But the Eastern people, the yogis, have developed systems to do this, to push the nervous system rapidly. But it happens very often spontaneously without someone trying to do anything about it, and just happens. And then naturally, in the olden days, these kinds of things used to be called miracles. Yeah. And nowadays, there's no more miracles. Well, let's take this.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because you think of what you call the spontaneous opening of expanded awareness. Correct. That's sort of a lot of words to say something. But in an earlier time, was called a miraculous occurrence.
Yeah.
Elevated consciousness.
Right.
A time of great revelation of God speaking to you.
Now, take like this fellow, St. Paul, yeah? He's going or walking or riding to Damascus in the olden days. And suddenly this big ball of white light descends, and Jesus standing in a ball of light and says, hey, why don't you lay off of my people and stop doing whatever you're doing and all that? And he's very impressed, and he even blinded, and he falls down, and one thing and another. But anyway, he makes it somehow to Damascus. And there he starts a big campaign, and he talks about his experience, the big public relations thing, and he got the thing going. He got the church built, and the Judeo-Christian ethic came out of this, and bingo, and all the things that, that come with this. So we've got something.
Yeah.
Now, suppose the same thing would happen, and this fellow, so St. Paul, say, is driving down on Route 128. Yeah. Driving down.
Route 128 doesn't go to Damascus.
What did I say to Damascus?
It goes to Dedham.
So, okay, so then this fellow is driving, and suddenly this big ball of light descends in front of his windshield, and there's Jesus standing in front of him, and he gets very, very impressed, and his driving naturally gets kind of wobbly. And so, sure enough, there's a cop behind him, and he says, ooh, and gets him off to the side of the road. And he says, sir, may I have your license and registration and all that? And this fellow is so impressed, and he keeps babbling something about Jesus and all that. And the cop says, well, you must be driving under the influence, right? So he arrests him and takes him in the station. Then what happens is that he comes to the station, and then they tell him, well, he still is under the influence, you see. So they call an ambulance and send him off to the mental hospital. So now the reception desk, they interview him, a very short interview, and the guy puts down in the logbook that the fellow came in with an acute psychotic or schizophrenic episode with religious overtones. That's it. And this is what we did to the miracle. So we took the miracle and we ground it down really to gray powder. So no more miracles. Okay. Everybody's complaining that during the Bible times, on every page of the Bible, you have a miracle or two, and now there's no miracles. This is what we're doing to the miracles. We're just flattening them out.
What is it that is evolving? And you talked about the nervous system evolving, right? But is there something else that is evolving that is able to be sensitive to this higher level of reality?
We have this notion of the soul. Well, I'm talking about the soul. It's a kind of non-physical thing, highly theoretical. And so when you go to church, you take this soul out of the closet and polish it up a little bit, and then you go to church and the other one with your soul. Then you come back and put it back in the closet till next week. So that's about the idea of a normal person, the soul. But actually, that's not the case. I mean, we don't have souls, but it's just the other way around. The soul has us. So that is that thing that evolves, the permanent, eternal thing is the soul, and the body is a kind of disposable thing. As you know, you use a body like a car for 80,000 miles, 100,000 miles, and you junk it, and that's it, you get another one. So it's the driver is the soul who uses the body for a while, and then he runs it into the ground, and he gets another one sooner or later.
And so it's the soul which is experiencing evolution, and not our personality, not our physical existences.
That is, the soul is the repository of information that we gather during life. Well, okay, maybe we should draw another diagram. Physical bodies are here, another physical body, and this is Joe, and this is Jim, and this is Sarah. etc. Now, clearly, this is the physical level. Yeah. Now, on this physical level, we all separate. You sit there, and I sit here, and we're all separate. Now, let's draw another level. This level is slightly higher, and let's call this the level of the soul. Yeah. Well, there will be some mingling here. Let's draw this person as extending to practically infinity this way. Now look what happens. At the physical level, we're separate, and there's this much distance between us. Let's say that on the soul level, this person extends this much, and the other person gets slightly mixed in with it. That is, the souls are in a way in touch with each other. Okay, they overlap, these two lines. Now let's go now to a higher level, and let's call this, say, the level of the higher self, which is kind of the boss of that soul. There, what we find is that this fellow's higher self extends this much, and the other fellow's extends this much. There is more overlap between them. On the very highest level, which is the high spiritual level, we are basically overlapping completely. Everybody is overlapping everybody else. In other words, everything and everyone is everywhere. In other words, we've become omnipresent. This is the state of highly spiritual perfected beings, or gods, you may call them. Okay?
Okay, and so that we exist on all of those simultaneously.
On all of those simultaneously,
So then,
but we're not aware of it.
In your view, then when we see each other as separate entities, that's only seen on one plane of reality.
Correct. And so whether we like it or not, we're all evolving towards godhood. But you know, it takes eons, so don't hold your breath.
Is that the purpose of evolution?
Naturally. Because at that point, you start understanding how the system works. And one of the good things about this system is that the system wants to teach you about itself.
What
It's
does
a
it
good system.
Yeah. What does it want to teach you?
Well, if you are omnipresent and you're all-knowing, that is the state which the system wants you to be in. Because the system is an intelligence or information gathering system. And it's also freely distributing that information.
In your view, we all started off somewhere a long time ago in which there was sort of undifferentiated matter, which slowly, millions and millions and millions of eons, evolved until a very complex organism that we now call a human being. And it has a nervous system which we at this particular point in time understand as being sensitive to certain levels of reality, to our eyes, our ears, our nose, other sensory perception. And that's sort of what we call material ordinary reality that enables us to drive cars and do our work every day. However, there is an evolutionary movement that will continue to push us beyond where we are today. And the thing which is going to be pushed is our soul. And that at some point, we will have these experiences of elevated consciousness in which higher realities are not only seen, but lived. And ultimately, we come into perfection.
Whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Can we speed that up by doing it?
Yeah. Well, you use the meditative techniques which push the nervous system a lot faster than the normal evolutionary rate. Those techniques are available, but you don't need to do anything. It's going to happen anyway.
To happen. What a view. It's a very big, bright view.
His full name was pronounced Itzhak Bentov, but to most people he was known simply as Ben. Ben would would usually start his talks by saying, now we will talk about all there is, from atom to cosmos, from humanhood to godhood, no less. And he would talk about the nature of reality and our place in it, and his own model of the universe, and his personal experiences in expanded states of consciousness. And finally, at the end, the ultimate question, who runs the show? Ben had a tremendous sense of humor and a capacity to explain very complex ideas in a very simple and understandable way. And he illustrated his 2 books with his own cartoon-like drawings. Niels Bohr has said, some things are so serious that one can only laugh about them. Ben called himself a nuts and bolts man, a plumber. He was trained as a mechanical engineer, and somewhere along the way, he started meditating and his consciousness opened up so that reality began to be perceived by him in 2 ways, 2 kinds of knowledge: the linear, scientific, objective knowledge, and the direct, intuitive, inner knowledge of a mystic. The combination of these 2 gave him a unique and a very unusual perspective on the nature of reality. First of all, he saw reality as a hologram. It's a totality in which every part is related to every other part, and they're all interdependent. And this hologram he perceived as vibratory in nature. In other words, as he said, it's an off and on reality, and we are only part-time here. It's an oscillating field. And it may appear to us as a continuous reality, whereas in fact, it's like a film composed of separate frames. He looked at reality as a whole as consciousness itself. Consciousness in the state of evolution, of unfolding itself to know itself. And there is nothing outside it. So that the physical reality, the manifest world, is only another expression of that reality, which is consciousness or existence itself, aware of itself. And matter is then another expression of consciousness at different levels of evolution, so that one can look at reality as being composed of an innumerable number of levels of reality, each level having its corresponding level of consciousness. And reality is perceived by those who are experiencing it only on the level of their own evolution of the nervous system. The mechanism in the physical body that perceives reality is the nervous system itself. And so as a biomedical engineer, this is what Ben specialized in, he became interested in studying the effects of changes in consciousness on physiology. And I must say that Ben, whenever he talked about these matters, never claimed this to be any sort of ultimate teaching. He spoke about this as a working model. And he would say, I speak from my present level of ignorance, because ignorance grows exponentially. The more questions you ask and the more answers you get, the more questions there are to ask. So it's an unending process of unfoldment of consciousness. And Ben saw reality, or I should say reality unfolded itself to him in the form of structure, because he dealt with mechanisms. To someone else with another background, reality would reveal itself in terms of let's say, poetic metaphor or vibrations of different sounds to a musician, so that we all are like snowflakes, all similar, yet all different. And the subtitles of his two books actually indicate that reality appeared to him in terms of structure, because the subtitles are on the mechanics of consciousness and on the mechanics of creation. So Ben has designed instruments to study these physiological changes that occur in the body when a certain energy rises through the spine. In the East, it's called Kundalini, called serpent. It rises up the spine and awakens certain energies in the body, which allow perception to become broader, and the brain functions then on a different level. He called it his model of Kundalini. Ben looked at reality as being driven by the force of evolution to infinity as consciousness unfolds itself. So in this graph, this arrow would represent the energy of evolution. And the bell curve, so-called, is a method to show graphically statistical data. And if the peak of this curve represents the average level of consciousness of humanity now, and the lower end of it shows the lowest level of consciousness, let's say the mafia types, as he used to put it, then the cutting edge here, the highest edge, would be individuals such as Einstein or Leonardo da Vinci. Now, as evolution pushes this ahead, some years from now, this bell curve will assume this position. So what will happen? That the average consciousness will be where the advanced consciousness is today. The low level will be where the average is today. And the high consciousness of humanity at that time will be something that we can hardly imagine. Because as he used to say, the potential of the human nervous system is enormous. And we really don't know where it's taking us, from humanhood to godhood. And this chart shows an experiment that he did with a subject sitting on a chair that had a device attached to it called ballistograph. And the ballistograph is something that picks up micro vibrations of the body. So the line curve that you see reflects the motion up and down of the subject as the breathing occurs. And then the small wiggly lines superimposed on that indicate the heartbeat. The lower part of the chart shows the same individual in a state of deep meditation, which also means deep relaxation. And look what happened. The breathing is practically gone. It's a straight line. And what was a disrupted pattern of the heartbeat has turned into a regular sine wave. And looking at this as an engineer, Ben said, this is an effect of harmonization of all the frequencies within the body, and the body is now resonating like a tuned instrument. And he came up with what he called the Kundalini syndrome model. In other words, when this energy in the spine rises, the harmony occurs where the vibration turns sine wave at 7 cycles per second, or 7 hertz, as compared to the regular disrupted pattern. And as an engineer, he looked at the body in terms of vibrating systems or oscillators. And in this case, there are 5: the heart aorta system, the brain itself, a cavity in the brain which is filled with fluid, a ventricle, and then the brain itself, the sensory cortex, and then all this results in an electromagnetic field around the head. A system which comes into harmony within itself becomes more powerful than others, and it will entrain, this is another term he used, it will entrain or pull after itself a system that is out of harmony. So once this oscillator or resonating system comes into harmony, it will trigger the rest one after the other. It's a domino effect. So comes blood through the aorta, and he called the aorta the biggest plumbing in the body. So it's a tremendous impact on the body, and it shakes the body so that it vibrates. It hits the bifurcation into the legs, and a certain plane wave is reflected up. The next pulse comes down, and the plane wave and the pulse clash, and it creates a disruption in the body. When the harmonious 7 hertz vibration is set up, it seems that the heart and the lungs begin to talk to each other, and they begin to work in harmony, so that a pulse comes down and waits for the reflection to come up, and they both go up together, and then the next pulse comes down, and there is no clash occurring anymore, and the body goes into resonance, triggering the next oscillator, which is the brain. And looking at the head, again, from the point of view of engineering, it's a rigid box resting on a resilient column, which is the spine. What happens is, as the body goes up and down, the skull is vibrated, and the brain, which is a gel-like substance, is floating in a fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid, so that each time the body goes up, it's hitting the skull and then goes down, and so up and down it goes, and it creates a plane wave within the brain. The brain has a characteristic called piezoelectric, which means that when it's stimulated mechanically, it develops an electromagnetic field around it, which is this field right here. So this is the second oscillator, which triggers the third. This is the fluid-filled cavity in the brain called ventricle. And due to this regular vibration of 7 cycles or 7 hertz per second, a standing wave is created, is established in the ventricle, which again creates a very harmonious frequency. And this in turn triggers the sensory cortex. This is a cross-section of the brain, and this is a cross-section of the third ventricle filled with fluid. On top of the third ventricle is a drum-like surface with a bundle of nerve fiber crossing it, which connects the right and left brain hemispheres. And this is very important, because as the fluid vibrates harmoniously, it activates this nerve fiber, and it harmonizes the 2 brain hemispheres. And we know that consciousness opens up when the synchronization of the functioning of the 2 hemispheres occurs. And then a certain current is established in the sensory cortex in the lobe of the brain. And as I said before, all this results in an electromagnetic field around the head, so that the head actually becomes an antenna capable of sending out and receiving information which it could not do otherwise. And in that state, higher perceptions become possible. And this was Ben's theory, that through the mechanism of Kundalini and the resonant state of the body, higher perceptions become available. This is an illustration of the sympathetic resonance, how those oscillators trigger each other. If you pluck the strings of this violin, then the strings on this one will resonate without being touched. And this is how the oscillators relate to each other through resonance. And so, as we walk on this planet Earth, which is charged negatively, by the way, we are bathed in a sea of vibrations of all kinds of electromagnetic fields and all kinds of frequencies, radio and others. And the ionosphere is charged positively, and the potential between the two is constantly fluctuating, so that we're subjected to all sorts of influences all the time. But in that state of resonance at 7 hertz, we plug into the vibration of the Earth itself, which is stable, and it happens to be the same 7 cycles per second, so that this biosphere around the Earth resonates at the same frequency, and we get locked into the frequency of the planet itself. And this is why the meditative state is such a relaxing state that some people find it difficult to come out of. Now, having become part of the vibration of the Earth, we then in turn plug into the vibration of the entire solar system, because our Earth here is shown surrounded by all kinds of vibrations as well. There is the magnetopause, magnetosphere, plasma sheet, you name it, trapped radiation. There are acoustical waves, the solar wind coming from the sun, which is also affecting the Earth. So that having tuned into the frequency of the Earth, we in turn tune into the frequency of the entire solar system and the sun, and so on into the cosmos. This is the cosmic connection. As Ben measured these fields around the body, he found that at that frequency of 7 hertz, the field around the body expands the energy that can be measured, and it extends to about 20 inches and tapers off. In a situation where there were hundreds of people meditating at the same time, Ben conducted an experiment because many of these individuals reported hearing inner sounds inside their heads. So when he measured the frequencies of the sounds that they heard, he found that there was one major sound and then other peaks where many people heard certain frequencies. And as he looked at this, and of course this is in kilohertz, as he looked at this, he realized that these other peaks are really the harmonics of the initial sound. In other words, everybody is really hearing one sound, but then it breaks up into harmonics, and some people hear entire chords. It really varies depending on one's evolution. This is how the third ventricle actually looks in the brain, and this is the cross-section of it that we spoke about. And on the brain, there's a narrow band called the sensory cortex. When stimulated mechanically with a needle, for example, during operations, it creates sensations in different parts of the body. And the sensations are laid out in this pattern, and this is called the homunculus, or the little man. And as you notice, the toes are inside the fold of the brain, and then the hip, the hand, and so on. The internal organs are here. So usually the signal goes to the sensory cortex and back to the motor system, telling the body what to do, how to react to the stimulus. But what happens in the Kundalini process, that this circuit becomes activated, and one begins to experience certain parts of the body spontaneously without them being actually stimulated physically. So one doesn't really know, is it happening in the brain or is it happening on the physical level? So eventually, as this current, and he really called it not a current, but an alignment of neurons due to the stimulation of the fiber here, the nerve fiber across the brain, this alignment eventually becomes a permanent situation so that one's range of perceptions is tremendously expanded. And another thing that happens is that this current or alignment goes also through the pleasure centers, so that actually a person in this state is in a state of bliss, and a yogi sitting in a cave in the Himalayas is actually having a lot of fun. So nobody's forcing them to sit for days on end cross-legged. And as Ben said, you can speed up the process of evolution, but we're all on this conveyor belt, and nature is carrying us along, and we will get there anyway, from humanhood to godhood, whether we like it or not. So eventually, as this current continues, starts at the toe and goes up around the body, and it opens up certain energy centers in the body known as chakras. And eventually the current begins to go round and round, and its function is to clear the body of stress. so that it can actually perceive higher realities. And if there is a blockage anywhere, it will keep pushing through that until it's cleared so that it can actually go further. And some people can experience great discomfort because of that, and not understanding what the mechanism is, and then wanted actually to inform the medical community, particularly the psychiatric community, about the phenomenon, so that certain symptoms would not be misdiagnosed sometimes as they are, as schizophrenia or actually some physical illness, which it is not. Certainly, this mechanism and this phenomenon was known in antiquity, and this pharaoh is saying, my status symbol is this, that my Kundalini has risen to the center in the forehead. And in this painting, it's being said, again, it's all coded in these graphic patterns. This is saying, my Kundalini has reached this level and has gone even beyond the pharaohs. So this knowledge really was quite universal. Now we will continue, and we will look at the way Ben looked at reality. Because what is it that gives us our reality? And it was described in his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, on the Mechanics of Consciousness. And I will talk later why he used the pendulum as a symbol of what he was talking about. We are dealing with two realities. One is this physical, solid reality that we get blue and black marks from, as he said, when we bump into it. But the information about it is given us by our senses. So that is our subjective reality. And so the two really are giving us the totality of our environment. So what is the objective physical reality? Let's look at the atom. If we magnify the atom and zero in on the electron, and now we think now we will get the answer to what physical matter is. But if we analyze the electron, all we find is an oscillating electromagnetic field. There's no physical matter as such. So we think, well, maybe the nucleus will give us the answer. And we zero in on the nucleus, and we find that it too is only an electromagnetic oscillating field in the void, because between the nucleus and the electron and outside of them, there is nothing but void, the same void that fills in the interstellar space. And the ratio of the distance between the nucleus and the electron would be analogous to a head of a pin in the middle of this room and something rotating around it 30 feet away, and the rest is void. So what is physical matter? Ben drew an analogy between the electron and the pendulum by looking at the cross-section, as it were, of the atom and comparing it to reciprocal motion. In other words, we see the electron now on this side, now on the other side of the nucleus, which would be the pendulum motion. So what happens in the pendulum? It stops, it moves, stops, and moves again. In other words, it's action and rest, action and rest. If you took an actual pendulum and would swing it and attach a pin to it, and you would draw a piece of paper under it like this, it would describe a sine wave. Here the pendulum moved and stopped, moved and stopped. And reality really are the spaces between the points of rest. We perceive reality when there is motion. And reality is really nothing but oscillating fields in the void. And the reason I can touch this screen and I don't go through the floor is because my atoms, or the electrons of my atoms, are actually repelling the electrons of the floor. But if I would speed up my vibration, then I could very well go through the floor. So that it's the interaction between the atoms in this reality that gives us the illusion of solid matter. So how do we get information about this solid physical reality? It is through our senses, through the subjective reality. So let's look at that. How does the neuron work? if this is a neuron, and this is a baseline when the neuron is at rest, when it's stimulated by something, and it doesn't care whether it's a loud noise or a bright light, it simply says, ouch, I'm being disturbed. So the more such spikes you have on the baseline, the more intense the stimulus. But somehow through a miracle of our physiology, our brain can construct our reality out of these spikes that simply indicate a stimulation of the nervous system. And we see beautiful flowers and animals and the sky and so forth. And as we know, our senses are very inadequate. They're very limited and imperfect. Even bees, for example, can perceive ultraviolet light, and the dogs can hear the ultrasonic. So that we see reality through our senses only through a very narrow slot. And the rest is really unknown to us. And so we're looking at the physical objective reality, which is oscillating, as we saw, through another system, our subjective reality, through our nervous system, which also perceives it through action, rest and action and rest and action and rest. So one oscillating system is looking at another oscillating system, and the picture is very blurred indeed. We can extend our reality through instruments, telescopes and microscopes, but in the final analysis, it is only our senses that give us the knowledge. So our subjective reality then is the sum of impressions conveyed by our senses, coded in periods of action and rest, which are oscillating electrical states of the nervous system. And we're constantly comparing one thing to another, otherwise we would not perceive reality. For example, if the muscle of the eye is anesthetized, then we do not see anything because the eye needs to scan all the time in order to see something. So both realities become real due to a change occurring between two states of rest. When there is change, there is motion, and when there is no change and a total state of rest, then reality, as far as we are concerned, disappears because we cannot perceive it. So let's look at the overall picture. Here is the atom, and it can be represented as a sine wave of motion and rest, which is analogous to the motion of the pendulum. Now, let us take a hypothetical situation where we are taking a wavelength, let's say a red photon, which has a very large amplitude. The distances between the points of rest are very far apart. And then we take the same, let's say 1 inch, in other words, the same unit of frequencies, and we speed them up so that within the same length we have many more ups and downs, and let's say it's a violet photon, and then the points of rest get a little closer together, but we get more of them within that span. Then we speed it up even more, let's say the gamma rays or X-rays, and we see that we get even more spikes and or waves, and they get even closer together. Now, let us imagine a hypothetical situation where the speed has become so fast that it's become infinite. At infinite speed, there will be no more oscillation, and the points of rest will in fact overlap, and you would get a straight line. Now, what kind of state would that be? First of all, we see that it's a paradox because the infinite speed now has become total rest. We could probably call it the state of the absolute. It's the source out of which all the frequencies arise. And it will also have the maximum energy. All energy is in it, but it's all in a potential state. And when it begins to vibrate, then it creates all these different frequencies which begin to interact, as we saw before, creating our reality. So one could summarize this by saying the absolute is the point where extremes merge, and a state of rest implies infinite speed. In fact, they become one and the same. And this state, the absolute state, is the substrate for all reality which emerges out of it. In particle physics, there is a principle of uncertainty which was formulated by Heisenberg. And it says, when the momentum or the speed of a particle is known, its position becomes unknowable. The more we know about one, the less we know about the other. Applied to the pendulum, what does it give us? When the pendulum stops before it reverses direction, we do know its speed because it's 0. And then it stops again and we know its speed again. So that means that at those points, its location becomes unknowable. And as Ben said, it can be found anywhere in the universe. That is, it becomes the universe. It fills all creation. It is everywhere. And based on this, he developed much of his further thinking. If this is our solid reality, and like a pendulum, we oscillate and we take off every now and then, and we touch that absolute state of total rest, but it happens so fast that we're not even aware of it, and we come back as if nothing had happened. But suppose we can expand that state and experience it, and in fact we can, then this is what will happen. Here is our reality, and here is the other reality, which we now have expanded. And we can be conscious on that level simultaneously with this level, so that we can actually have the benefit of both. And we can explore that reality and bring back the information. And this is in fact what Ben did. And the information that I will be talking about from now on was received in those states of expanded consciousness. Usually in those states of expanded consciousness, there is a different perception of time. People who come out of those states usually say, time has stopped, or at least it's slowed down. What is happening here? And to put it in some kind of perspective, Ben designed this diagram. This is our time space, and this is the now moment where they cross, which is going from the past into the future, the eternal now moment. And we can project 1 second on it, 2 seconds on it, and so forth. It's very reliable, and we can measure it, and we can catch trains on time and be to work on time and so forth. However, superimposed on that are 2 other vectors of space-time, which are our subjective space-time. And usually they overlap, and we don't even know the difference. But in altered states of consciousness, there is a deviation. And by altered states, we can mean sleep or meditation or those deep altered states. And the angle of deviation actually determines the depth of that state. And look what happens. If we project 1 second, we see that now in this position of the subjective time, we have 2 seconds for 1 objective second, which means that our time has already doubled. Now visualize the situation where the subjective time tilts more and more and more, where it practically becomes parallel with objective space. And this is what it would look like. Our subjective time is now overlapping objective space. What kind of situation would that be? Well, it would take no time to go anywhere, because you are everywhere at once, because your subjective time has overlapped objective space and it's become infinite. This would be the state of samadhi, the ultimate expansion of consciousness, in which your consciousness fills the entire universe. Well, in those states, where does one go? There are many places to go. And again, to put it into some kind of perspective, Ben designed this diagram of the levels of consciousness in creation, because every level, as we saw before, reflects a state of evolution of matter on that level. And there is an indigenous population on all these levels that relates to that level. And our human band is only over here. So he looked at consciousness in its totality. If this vector here represents the quality of consciousness, this one represents the quantity of consciousness, or the capacity of a nervous system to react to stimuli. So here we put the atom, the virus, the plant, and an animal, and finally a human being. So this is where we are in the range of things, and there are many other levels above. And of course, it's all going towards the ultimate state of the absolute that we talked about before, and they're all contained within it. Consciousness is modular. A larger consciousness contains a lesser consciousness. We also see here these curves, and these are called energy exchange curves, and they peak in the middle of each band, which means that the interaction with the environment here is the highest. And I find myself, and you find yourselves, in this physical reality because our energy exchange curve is highest in this level. However, we can also interact with the neighboring realities, but as you can see, the curve here tapers off so that we're not interacting as clearly and as well in those other realities, but still we do. And our nervous system is capable of spanning all these levels, except that we seem to be tuned only to this physical reality. And like a radio set, we can receive all the others, but we keep listening to this one. But it's up to us to tune into all the others as well. Now, the reality below us is the mineral. Those are the realities that Castaneda talks about, for example, in his books, the interaction with those realms. And the upper part is interacting with the next level to the human band, which is the so-called emotional level or astral. There are different names for these levels, and it doesn't really matter as long as we know what it means. And the next level is the mental, then the intuitive or causal, and so forth. There are certain characteristics about these levels, and we interact with all of them, and we can function in all of them. The one next to us is the emotional level, and this is where we go in sleep. As Ben said, this is a preview of coming attractions, because when we die, this is where we go, and we all interact on this level. The next level is the mental level, and emotions, in fact, are not allowed there, so that before you can cross the boundary, it's almost as if there is a customs official who says, any emotions to declare, and down you go if you can't release emotions that are negative. Actually, the emotions such as fear or anger. However, love, which sometimes is perceived as an emotion, is what Ben called is the glue of the universe. And without it, in fact, you can't even go higher. So when you abandon those emotions, you can enter the mental level, and here your reality is what you think. It is also so on our level, but to a lesser degree. But here you're actually creating your reality by what you think. The next level is the intuitive level, and this is where we all interact, and people of creative professions particularly visit those areas, and on that level, they pick up a lot of information and they bring it down. The creative aha moment of discovery, for example, of an inventor or an artist, when suddenly a solution comes or an image comes, is in fact something that one perceived on this intuitive level. And as you saw before, our time expands on higher levels. So there was an enormous amount of time here to study the entire situation and then to bring it down. But when you bring it down, it appears like a flash, the aha moment, whereas in fact you spent a lot of time there getting ready for it. Our next subject will be a very important principle, the hologram, which is the basis of reality as Ben perceived it. And as usual, Ben had some interesting diagrams to explain his ideas, and he explained the hologram in terms of 3 pebbles being dropped into a pizza pan filled with water. And you drop these pebbles simultaneously into the water. What happens? Each pebble announces what happens to it. In fact, it's screaming, "Help, I'm drowning in a pizza pan." So it sends out these wavelets that reach every point on the surface of this water. And every pebble does that. So if we take this water now, which resulted in a pattern of wavelets that now clash into one another, all this information about the pebbles. And it's called the interference pattern. In cross-section, it would look like that. And if you quick freeze the water and you get a piece of ice like this, which is actually a photograph of all the information about these pebbles. And then you take what is known as coherent light, or light where all the rays are of the same frequency, a laser light, and you shine it through this interference pattern. Lo and behold, you see the 3 pebbles reconstructed 3-dimensionally in space. This is the important part of the hologram, that all the information is contained in this pattern, and every point of this pattern contains that information, because if by mistake you break this piece of ice and you end up with a little sliver of it and you shine the same light through it, you will still get your 3 pebbles. So this method of storing information is the most efficient way that nature has devised. And so Ben was a great believer and observer of the phenomenon of the relationship between the micro level and the macro level. When nature comes up with a method that really works, then it will be repeated on all these different levels, and we see more of that later. This is an actual photograph, if you can see it, of waves interacting with each other, creating this moire pattern of waves. It will actually look something like that. And here, if you shine this coherent light, the 3-dimensional object gets reconstructed. Now, if instead of those 3 pebbles, we substitute 3 individuals, because we, like the pebbles, are constantly sending out information about ourselves in a variety of ways. And all these fields are interacting, creating a hologram, an interference pattern. And you could say that human consciousness is one big hologram of information about humanity as a whole. We are one mind, one consciousness. And of course, the implications of this are stupendous, because if we realize that everything that we do, that we think, affects not only us, but everyone else, and not only everyone else in humanity, but it also goes beyond the boundaries of our planet. And another way of looking at this would be to see these 3 pebbles, or 3 separate individuals who feel themselves so isolated on this physical level. But if these lines here indicate ever widening consciousness, we notice that on these higher levels, we begin to interact. So these 2 are interacting here, these 2 here, but all 3 are interacting on the next level. And if you visualize humanity being composed of these separate dots and billions of us, then on the highest level, we are all interacting and we are all one. And of course, you can look at it in reverse, that here's human consciousness, all one, and it sort of percolates down or dribbles down into these separate units, and we all think that we are so separate. And as we interact, we entrain each other as we saw before, there is a principle of resonance and of entrainment or rhythm communication. In other words, a consciousness that has done its homework. This is a teacher, a guru, who has advanced somewhat beyond the others. Then his energy, his consciousness will be more coherent, it will be more harmonious. And like those oscillators that we looked at, it will entrain and pull after itself consciousnesses that are less evolved. So now in this next section, we will be looking at the model of the universe that Ben came up with as a result of his personal experience. But before that, we will look at the model of the universe according to the Big Bang theory as postulated by Gamow. In the infinite dark void, all energy, all space-time were condensed at one point, the cosmic egg. And this cosmic egg, for a reason we'll never know, exploded. And it exploded evenly in all directions, and the energy went out in the form of light radiation, photons. Gradually, stable particles were formed, protons, neutrons, and gases began to form. Helium and hydrogen gas were formed. And the gases condensed into stars with heavier elements forming in their cores. And the stars were condensing into galaxies, into clusters of spiral and other galaxies. And as the stars aged, they turned into red giants. And in dying, they would explode, scattering cosmic dust through the universe. And this cosmic dust containing heavier elements would condense again into clouds and new stars and planets. So that the same substance is recirculating, and is really, there is nothing new. Only the forms change. And the atoms from distant galaxies are found in the atoms of our Earth, and therefore in our own physical bodies. So this is the hologram to which we belong and of which we are a part, an inseparable part. And so now I will look at Ben's model of the universe, which he developed having looked at this existing theory of the Big Bang, and which he modified somewhat because what he saw was a different kind of bang, a continuous, modest bang. In the 60s, new celestial bodies were discovered, and they were called quasars. These were radio galaxies of enormous size, the oldest galaxies, the oldest celestial bodies ever observed. And many of them showed a jet emerging from the center and shooting out. These galaxies are the most distant objects ever observed in the universe, and they're the fastest object moving. Here we see the jet emerging. And as I mentioned before, Ben was a great believer in the analogy of the micro level reflecting the macro level. And based on the evidence produced by the quasars, he came up with this model of the universe. What Ben was saying is that actually this is a prototype of what happened in the beginning of the universe, and that the quasars are the chips off the old block, and that cosmic egg, instead of expanding evenly in all directions, or isotropically as it's called, it actually was an explosion in one direction, like a balloon pricked with a needle. And what would happen if you had a jet emerge from this original cosmic egg? There was nothing around it. It was the only thing in that vast void. So this jet would be pulled back in upon itself by this gravitational mass. It would be analogous to holding up a water hose, and the water would eventually fall down and then rise again, and this would be the current that would be established. So it would be a continuous bang, a modest but a continuous bang. Quasars were observed to be not evenly distributed in the observable universe. The observable universe is what we see through our telescopes. If this is our Earth, then this is the radius of the distance where we can make our observations through the existing telescopes. Quasars were observed moving faster and being further away in the north galactic pole. And in the south galactic pole, they were more concentrated and slightly off the true pole by about 30 degrees. So when Ben looked at that, he realized that there was anisotropy. In other words, there was an uneven distribution of quasars. This was an element that somehow contradicted or brought in a new element into the Big Bang theory. And this is what he developed as his own. So this would be the structure then. This is the core of the structure, which is called torus, T-O-R-U-S, a melon-like structure. And matter emerges from the center in the same sequence as we saw before, condensing from light radiation, from photons to stable particles and so on. Then it expands, and visualize this as a three-dimensional form, goes around and gets pulled back in upon it into the black hole. This is a white hole and the black hole back to back. This is the gravitational collapse as galaxies are pulled in to the black hole and then re-emerge as energy again on another round to go around and around again. And each time matter goes around, it gets refined. Its consciousness is on the next rung of the spiral. This is where Ben would place our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, because quasars were found off the true galactic pole in the south. In other words, he said, we may be looking straight back into the jet here, whereas the other side showed the quasars further away and moving faster. That means that they were entering this expansion where matter is rarefied and goes around. Now, if we equate matter with consciousness, and as I said before, there is nothing but consciousness, and matter is only a form in which consciousness appears. So in that case, the expansion that our galaxy is now entering, the expansion of matter, could also mean the expansion of consciousness. And this could explain perhaps why we are experiencing a certain change in consciousness on this planet. This would be the core of that torus structure. The white hole through which energy emerges, condenses, becomes matter, goes around, gets pulled back into the black hole. And between them is what might be called the singularity point. In physics, it's a situation where laws no longer apply. And here, a transmutation occurs of matter that has condensed to an extreme, and it becomes energy again to reemerge as a new universe. So one could say that there are several phases to this trip of matter around the torus. Phase one, from energy to matter through expansion. The ultimate expansion is at this point. Then there is condensation and finally a gravitational collapse where the gravitational pull is such that even photons can't escape to tell the story. That's why it's a black hole. As you recall, we talked about the interference pattern of information, which is the hologram. Remember that every speck of matter on the surface of this torus is sending out information about itself. Our galaxy does, and so does a galaxy and many other galaxies which have gone ahead of us. So that the information that is being sent out gets interwoven into one web of information about the entire structure. This is the information that one can tap in those higher states of consciousness and in fact enter the knowledge that's available about the entire structure, because we are a part of this hologram, that little sliver that still retains some of that information. And by tuning into the totality of the hologram, we can have the information about every part of it. And that's exactly what Ben did. Again, the analogy between the macro level and the micro level. This is very similar to the ordinary chicken egg in shape. So what Ben did was to take a chicken egg and attach electrodes to the two ends of it and see if there was any current there. And lo and behold, there was a certain potential there of 2.4 millivolts, very small and yet there. So there is a field around every seed and every egg in nature that we know. In other words, there seems to be the same pattern in this egg as there is in this large torus. So nature tends to repeat a certain design. As an engineer, Ben dealt with structures, and he said there are certain elegant solutions to the problem. So hologram certainly is one for storing information, and this structure seems to be another one that is repeated on different levels. So here is our white hole and black hole and matter circulating round and around. In the center, it's hollow, and it's an electromagnetic field. And we could say that this interference pattern of information could be called the universal mind hologram. And also the concept of time enters here, because it takes time for matter to go around and for energy in the form of photons, light energy, to become matter. So time becomes a factor of distance of energy as it issues from the white hole and goes around, because time exists when there is motion and where there is mass. So that this is linear time from here to there, one round. This is the birth of time and this is the death of time. But seen from outside, as we're looking at it now from another dimension, we see that this is a continuum, and we're looking at it from perhaps an eternal point of view, so that this linear time is a very limited phenomenon in the scheme of things. And it is the force of evolution again that keeps driving this along. And Ben used to say that the torus is a distilling column of consciousness, that this structure actually is refining consciousness, which is equivalent to matter, as matter is recirculated through this black and white hole. There is a field like that around the human body, and the different frequencies interact, creating nodes. And also medicine is moving into a new field, new energy medicine or vibrational medicine. The body is seen as a field of interacting electromagnetic or electric fields. And a new medicine is really emerging. So now we will look at Ben's personal experience through those higher levels of creation. And these he described in his book, which he called A Cosmic Book on the Mechanics of Creation. As I said before, he saw things in terms of structure. So on that journey into the expanded states of consciousness, it's like a guided tour. You can ask questions and you get answers. And once you understand and you say, okay, I got it. The slide changes, the page is turned, and you're shown new things. So he asked, well, I've seen that model of the universe. In fact, he did perceive it in an expanded state. And then he started figuring out what it's all about. So having seen it, he said, well, it looks like a bounded structure. There must be something beyond it. I want to know. The moment the question is asked, his consciousness finds itself in this vastness of the infinite void, and the process is shown and explained to him. In the vastness of the dark void, a certain part becomes activated. This is where action will take place. And a light describes a certain territory. He called it proto-matter. This is a matrix, which will be eventually filled with matter, like the Chinese checkers, which get filled with those little marbles. And this field begins to polarize. As we saw before, the field, the ultimate field of the absolute, which the void is reconciling the opposites. So the opposites of the plus and minus are together. So they begin to separate, and it's like unscrambling scrambled eggs. And the tension is enormous because they don't really want to be separated and they want to come back together again. But this is what creates the dynamics of manifest creation, because you need the polarization in order for action to occur. So what happens next is this. As the two ends want to come together, there is finally a tremendous pull, and one side reaches the other, and a sound actually fills creation. This is the sound, the first word that creates different frequencies of vibration, and they begin to interact within this structure, and a certain current gets established and starts going around. Then there is a secondary sound, and a droplet is left in the middle. This becomes the focal point of this structure. And this is the white and black hole that we saw before. This is the consciousness whose body this is. The matter of this torus is like an oak tree in relation to the acorn. This center here, the black-white hole, is the consciousness that has the blueprint for this structure. And it's learning through the interaction of its parts, through all the particles that go around and around and get refined, and their consciousness is getting higher and higher each time around. This point grows in the process, it evolves. And what would you call a consciousness that is in charge of the universe? What is a consciousness whose body the universe is? And as Ben said, well, you would call it a creator. And he didn't know whether to call it a he or a she. He'll say, you can't say it's a chairperson of the universe, but it is the creator of the universe who is evolving by experiencing his body in this way. Well, once you have seen this, you want to know more about it, because again, this is a bounded structure, so there must be more. And we, with our finite mind, cannot grasp infinity or eternity, so we want to see what's next. And so the moment you ask, again, the next picture is shown to you and explained. And what you see are more such luminous toroidal shapes appearing in the void. And as you approach, you see that they are arranged in a spiral, 7 universes per each rung of the spiral. This seems like a lot to take in at first, and you begin to count and you realize that there are 7 rungs to the spiral, which means that there are 49 universes. And on top of the structure, there appears to be a very luminous something, and as you approach it closer, this brilliant white light seems to have a shape such as this. And Ben, being familiar with the Hebrew language, looked at that and he said, no, I must be programming myself. This looks like the Hebrew letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And immediately the explanation comes. No, this is not a Hebrew letter. This is an interference pattern of 4 energies interacting on this level, on this cosmic level. And they create this pattern consciousness, whose body this is. This consciousness contains the consciousnesses of all the 49 creators. In other words, consciousness is modular. As we saw before with the ducks, a more evolved consciousness, a larger consciousness, will contain the lesser ones. As Ben was looking at all these things, he said, I'm just a tourist. I'm snapping pictures and bringing them back. I don't know what I'm looking at. And I'm just one of you all. We're all on this cosmic journey on a bus, except some of us have window seats and some have aisle seats. I happen to have a window seat, so I can share with you what I'm observing. So he had no explanations for these, except that he was seeing something and then asking questions. So as he approached this Aleph a little closer, what he saw was that the front of it was a brilliant white light, and the back was dark, and it looked rather three-dimensional. It's a hologram. And there are 22 such forms, interference patterns emerging from the luminous side, and they look exactly like the Hebrew letters. And he was explained again that these are interference patterns that were observed by seers in antiquity, and they incorporated them into the Hebrew letters, into the Hebrew alphabet, but they are there objectively to be observed. On the other side, the same forms emerge, but in a random, mixed-up order. And he was explained that these interference patterns are transducers of the Aleph energy down to the physical level. They step it down further and further to the physical level. And this whole diagram actually illustrates the law of the cosmic level, because what it's really saying that evil is simply ignorance of the law. The proper sequence of these characters is knowledge of the law, but a mixed up order is ignorance of the law, which then becomes evil. And what is the law? And when you ask the question, you're shown. Close up, this is the structure. The Aleph breaks itself down into 3 centers, 3 chakras, each one having these interference patterns in them, which look like Hebrew letters, and each Hebrew letter has an equivalent numerical value, so that everything is actually modular and structured. Each center has its own frequency in terms of color. The center, which is love, Ya, is gold. The center representing the will, Kol, is blue, and the center representing the creation is pink. When Ben looked at that, he realized that the white light of the Aleph, representing wisdom, is a combination of all these colors. And these are actually frequencies active on that level which create these holograms. Now, the law that we talked about, the law operative on this level, is interpreted in a very ingenious way. These characters, which then became the Hebrew language, can be read in different directions and mean opposite things. If you read from left to right, it reads Halef, which means go, or it's a green light. In other words, you can act safely if you act from love towards will. But if you act from will to love, self-will, before you know love, then it reads klaya. And in Hebrew, it means destruction or extinction. So that is the cosmic law. The cosmic law is love. And the ignorance of the cosmic law then causes destruction. And the creative center, read in opposite directions, means in the beginning there was the desire for life. Having seen this, you want to see the entire structure. And this is what you see. The Aleph and his 49 creators is enclosed in a sphere very similar to a biological cell. And in fact, it's like a DNA coil, and it does split at the end when this unit is mature. So, having seen this and the current constantly circulating around this, you want to break out and you want to see what's beyond that. But you keep on and you can't get out. When finally you do break through, this is what you see. You are surrounded by more cosmoses, and they're pressing against each other like frogs' eggs. And you're caught in this structure. It looks like a biological structure. So, again, you want to know where it's all leading you, and you go through this structure, and this is what you find. There is a term in biology, closed-packed structure. In other words, if you take a cell, you can only put 6 of the same size around it. And on top of that, you can only fit 3 so that they would be stable. And on top of that, only 1. So that from the side view, it will appear like this. It will be 1 on top of 3 on top of 7. And it will look like a pyramid with a triangular side on all sides, which is called tetrahedron. Now, what's interesting about that is that in physics, there is something known as fine structure constant, and it is 137. It is a method which demonstrates how atoms differ from each other. It determines the size of an atom because it determines the tension and the interaction between the electron and the nucleus. So it's interesting to note that the first stable structure on the cosmic level is a tetrahedron, and we on our physical plane here on Earth have the diamond, which is the strongest substance we know, and it has a tetrahedral molecular structure. So there is perhaps a resonance here with the cosmic level, and that's why the diamond is the strongest substance we know. And then these units of tetrahedrons form modules of 2 such tetrahedrons joined together, and this is how that field of cosmoses, the frog's eggs, is formed. Once you break out of that soup of cosmoses, you discover that they are contained in turn in a yet larger sphere, so that one structure is within another. And as you examine it closer, you see that in the center of this, perhaps you should call it supercosmos, there is a hollow. And inside that, cosmos shells are being formed, and they emerge from that and evolve towards the surface. Whereas the Aleph spiral has all those universes on the spiral evolving up towards the Aleph. So here, the cosmoses in turn evolve towards the surface of the supercosmos. And the mature cosmoses that emerge on the outside, they begin to cluster together and form a new supercosmos, and they kind of elbow their way in, pushing the other ones aside. And you see that this is a growing, almost biological structure. Now, on every level of these structures that you perceive, there is a consciousness in charge. The Aleph was in charge of the cosmos. And here on the level of the supercosmos, this form appears. And in order for you to know that it's a consciousness that you can interact with, a face or a likeness of a face will appear in it and say, I can talk to you. And in order to understand what it's saying, you merge with it, and then you begin to understand a little more about that level. Here I would like to digress a little bit to talk about consciousness, because there appear to be two types of consciousness. One that is the consciousness of the structure itself, and the other that uses that structure as a temporary dwelling. If we look at our own bodies, and for example, we talk to the cell of our kidney, and we ask the kidney cell, what is it that you do? What is your job here? The kidney cell will say, I don't really know. I'm just a little fellow here. Why don't you ask the boss? Now, who is the boss? It's the sum total of all the cells of the kidney. And it already is a consciousness that you can interact with. And the kidney will tell you, well, I purify blood, I do this and I do that. And so every organ in our body is a sum total of the consciousnesses of the cells that compose it. And then there appears to be a consciousness, which is the sum total of all the consciousnesses of all the organs. And you could say that it's perhaps a rudimentary consciousness, if you can call it that, of the body. It runs the body when it is unconscious. In other words, the other consciousness is away. When you sleep, when you are under anesthesia, there's somebody running your body. Somebody is breathing. The lungs know what they're doing. The heart continues to pump blood. It is conscious, and it's unrelated to the consciousness that is temporarily away. So the same thing happens on every level. There is a consciousness of the structure itself and another one that uses that structure and can come and go. So we can also say the same thing about our Earth, for example. It's a conscious being, and there is a consciousness that runs the planet. Its electromagnetic field, its temperature, its currents, and other things, the ecology of the planet. And then there must be another consciousness which uses it as a garage, as Ben used to put it. And it can come and go. It's a much larger consciousness. And so it's true of the sun and of every other level as you go up. So Ben perceives this as abstract forms that would appear on different levels, and they would communicate with you, learn from them. We saw this on the supercosmic level. Then comes the Ankh, the cross, the two triangles, the two crossing, and then something that looks a little bit like the Egyptian pharaoh, the first human form that runs the seventh level. There were 7 levels in all, and each level ever simpler, ever larger, and comprising the levels that were below it. As I said, consciousness is modular. So, as you go through all these levels, finally, you come to a level where all these levels are contained in one sphere, the manifest creation. Everything visible and invisible, everything that ever existed is in it. And around it is this infinite dark void, which is the consciousness itself. And as it vibrates, as we saw before, it creates manifest creation. So as you come closer to this, you begin to discern what appear to be rotating discs covering its surface. And as you look closer, instead of discs, you see that these are bars having little shapes underneath like that. And these bars spin around. These shapes spin around. And there are 3 layers of these. And the 4th, the outermost layer, looks like this. And you begin to recognize these as shapes known as the Sanskrit letters. And then this one as the symbol which stands for Om, or cosmic consciousness in Sanskrit. So again, you're explained when you ask about it, these are not Sanskrit letters. These are holograms, interference patterns that are active on that level, and they were perceived by the seers and incorporated into the Sanskrit alphabet. So, as you look at this manifest creation, you realize that there must be a consciousness that runs this, the ultimate consciousness. And you want to understand how the structure is run and what's happening with these rotating discs. And you are explained that as this cell or as this being grows, and we saw that it's constantly expanding and developing and evolving, it expands into the surrounding void, which is pure consciousness, as we remember, so that as it expands into it, the void begins to penetrate it. And these rotating discs are acting as modulators of the void. And by rotating, they create a sound, the word of creation, which then begins to interact within itself. It's a hologram of sound, or a hologram of different frequencies that begin to create all kinds of harmonics and all kinds of additional sounds that develop out of these interactions of different frequencies. And so the whole thing is forever evolving. So then you ask, so who is the top God? Who runs this structure? And the moment you ask, you find yourself in the infinite void, and suddenly a brilliant light comes down on you, so brilliant that you're blinded and you're shaking, because now you realize you are talking to the ultimate God of the structure. So what do? You peek under and you realize that this is a tunnel of light. So you enter that and you begin to ascend, and you go faster and faster. And in fact, you begin to tumble down faster and faster. And then you realize that it's making a U-turn. And at the end, there is something there. And you know that that is it. And you will soon be confronting the God of manifest creation. As you finally look at it, you realize that you are looking at yourself, a carbon copy of yourself. But that self sits there paying no attention to you, and you're lost. You don't know what to say to yourself. How's the weather up there? What do you say to yourself? So you revert to your old tested trick. You merge with yourself so that by merging, you can know yourself and you can find out what it's all about. So you turn around and you slowly back into yourself like into a tight garage. And when you finally do, what happens is that there is a tremendous bang and you become the void. Because you are the consciousness, which is the void. And that part of you that had never left has always been the void. And that observer that was watching through your eyes and guiding you through this obstacle course to go back to yourself, your higher self, was the observer that had never left and was watching you creating this whole phantasmagoria for yourself. We each create our own. And it's just a trip back home to reunite with your own self. And so we could say that we are the creators, the producers, and the consumers of our own reality, because we are the consciousness itself. And Ben liked to finish his talks by quoting a poem by an Indian sage, Shankara, which went like this. On the vast canvas of the self, the picture of manifold worlds is painted by the self itself. And that supreme self, seeing but itself, enjoys great delight.
Woohoo!
Ooh.
Yes, series.
Yeah, I thought actually only showing parts, it would only confuse it. So let's see the whole thing.
We did. So can you explain a little bit about why you wanted to play that video?
Yeah, in a way, it's self-explanatory, I guess. I mean, it's all about ourselves. It's all about finding ourselves, not even from out of an unconscious level of not even realizing you are yourself in your whole universe, in a sense. Everybody has their own focal point within the middle of it. And we're all part of the same. It's all the same consciousness. But each individual has a separate part of the whole hologram and capable of tapping into the whole hologram.
I think it's a little bit more as well, because you quite often mention this, because if the void is yourself, until you take responsibility for yourself, you'll only ever call it a void rather than you fill it. So it's all about
Fill it in creation itself, indeed,
being responsible for yourself.
From the beginning, already.
So, chat room, are there any questions? I think it's blown a few people's minds, series. I think actually, after all, Arwen liked it. Infinite Loop goes, everything is everything.
The journey to yourself is for any individual unique, because everyone has their own questions to be answered and their own search in their own direction of how far they dare to go actually to themselves, to the core of self.
So, and everything comes from sound.
Everything is sound here. The word created it all. And then I figured it's the Mandelbrot fractal what actually shows at least the principle of its infinity and I guess also a little bit of the holographic nature of it.
And the fact that the energies, frequencies,
it's all the same. I guess we have learned to separate everything and compartmentalize everything, and in the meanwhile actually losing touch of the connection of what the knowledge actually is, as it is just as a tree. Every science in their own branch and in their own root, based on their own roots, but joined together as a complete tree, with all the sciences in all the levels of the Platonic elements, in a sense: earth, water, air, fire, and ether. It's only a little bit hard to actually figure out how then everything in the physical sense works, and then I guess we confuse the visibility of the sky actually with the connection with the earth itself, in that there are actually separate creations as two different fields, between where we ourselves are actually the connectors between the two fields, as in having our roots in heaven and being the tree in the world. Yeah.
I think for some people, they do find it hard to marinate this spiritual side with the earthly side series. I don't mean everybody, but some people do not see this connection, do they?
It's because they only perceive themselves as a material thing instead of as the spirit who actually houses it, who actually watches through it. I mean, look at your thoughts, look at your emotions, and then look at who is watching. I mean, you have emotions, you have thoughts, you have a body. You are on a completely other level. Being is something else. It's not an identity. It's the expression itself. You know, how you create your own universe, in a sense. In all the growth levels.
Yes, and that we're all one, really. I mean, I've got a video with Bruce Lee saying it, because someone's trying to ask him what he thought he was. Was he an American? Was he from where he was born? And he just said, "We're all one. I'm not anything different. We're just one." That's the one thing we forget. And some of us feel that we've almost been sent here for some reason. Waking up, it doesn't seem to happen for a lot of other people. You know, they're still like the living dead out there. And yet for some people, it's such a spiritual way. It's not just about whether it's flat.
It's kind of that seed story of Jesus, for example, in how some are getting on the path and are eaten by the birds, and some are getting in stones and are, I don't know, and some are getting into the fertile ground. And what I figured, the fertile ground is actually our freedom. And the only thing you can actually practice your freedom is by taking complete and utter responsibility for yourself. Nobody is to be blamed for your own actions in that sense. No matter how you have.
We've been so programmed now, haven't we, series? You know, with the globe world, we're so programmed. And I mean, artists showed us last night that this preconception that they were telling us that everybody thought it was flat 300 years ago is rubbish. You can find newspapers just over 100 years ago with the same thing. In fact, we would be put in prison.
The state is our parent. We never get out of that childhood in that sense, barely getting into the puberty of it, let alone being an actual adult. We never grow up. And it takes a complete and utter taking of responsibility to actually get into the adult level. We are like that seed, and the only way to actually become the flower, what is potentially in the seed, by planting yourself in the most fertile ground. And that fertile ground is your freedom.
Series, I put a video out myself. That's with that lady, you know, she did regressions and found that there was 3 sort of pools of people. There was 3 levels, the first, the second, and the third. And the first ones were sent, they're older. The second ones are like antennas, and the youngest ones now, which are probably teenagers, hopefully will be the vibration to change the world. And then in that video, it's on the YouTube channel, this guy is trying to explain that most of us think that reality is outside our head, you know, what we're looking at, but that's not true. Reality is inside our head. Everything that is real is inside, not outside. This question, by the way, do you live outside in or inside out?
Inside out.
I live inside out. I'm pretty sure most of the chat room would say the same, but, you know, people have to think about it. But yeah, again, this whole thing that Series is talking about in this, that most people don't realize that we're living in multi-dimensions in our own bodies. You know, you can eat, you know, talk, breathe, walk, cuddle. It just goes on.
That with the particular thing like a radio station. We just tune in only to this particular thing because we are taught that this is the only reality, thinking that the rest is just nonsense or fiction or fantasy, etc. No matter what, as long as it's not reality. But if you actually develop as a child without being destroyed by the parenthood of society in that sense, and actually manage to become that adult and actually become the flower of who you are, you will see the most beautiful people around you. Those are the artists, those are the expressors of the love of what creation itself is. The reasonless giving of it, because only the reason is to never give it at all. And that's where we are programmed full of reasons to never love at all.
What, afraid to give things away, you mean?
I mean, we only keep our love a prisoner of our own fear. And yeah, coming across the Bible phrase of Ecclesiastes 12:13, where you actually have the only duty to fear God above everything and keep his commandments. In other words, love him above everything and love your neighbor as yourself. It's actually realizing who you are. And I see really no use in fearing in anything else. Let's stand what another thinks about me.
There is something else, Series, because you believe that they've done all this to cover up who we are.
Yeah, it's the only thing they cover up. It's the only thing they try to destroy. The realization of who you are yourself. I mean, as a child, you never get out of the collective mind level in that sense. You are kept into the religion level in that you have to believe, even in authority as a science thing, etc. I come across so many people who are so educated in that sense that I really see the pure brainwash of that we never have to learn anything else, while learning actually never stops. I mean, I can't go without a day without actually learning anything. It just happens, you know.
I don't know whether, I can't even say it's the right word, but I can't think of another word because it's a bit like talking to Dave Marsh. a year ago he wasn't taking and doing what he does now, and understanding what he's taking now, and reading and understanding what's up there in the sky. Series is the same. So it's a kind of very intellectual thing, this sort of flat earth thing. I don't really like using that word, but I can't think of another word. It's so deep. Some of us, though, are joined, aren't we? What do you call it? Like drawn to every day, trying to do something.
It's actually so simple that the complexness of what they teach you is actually just hiding the simpleness of it. They make it as difficult as possible to learn anything.
Life is a lot more simple than they've made us live it. We're just in fear and got so many worries and bills.
We're born in slavery.
They haven't even told us the truth about how eclipses work yet, and we're 2017.
Yeah, you know the fable of whole space happening, etc. In this video, he wasn't aware of flat Earth probably, but so far I figured that's actually how the universe is actually that single use of a universal step in the 49 within that whole DNA structure of a single cosmos as a consciousness, etc.
Hey, listen, Riddle's put in the chat room, we're waking up, but I'm just so surprised that not more people are waking up. But I suppose if more people wake up, it will change everything, and I suppose a lot of people are afraid of the change.
Yeah, I guess the expectation that everyone will wake up, that's not going to happen, because everyone is on their own level. And in a way, the further away you are from the truth of your core self, the longer it will take to actually get back to it. And yeah, everybody can do it.
Yeah, so this is not going to work if you don't know yourself.
If you're not even looking for yourself, I guess it's going to take even longer to actually get to yourself. I mean, so many are caught in kind of an act of who they think they have to be in the world, but never actually looking into themselves and see for who they really are, and express that part of actually being themselves. I mean, we are just an orchestrated act of how we should act, because we are then accepted the base fear of what another thinks, basically what your mother thinks to begin with.
And I suppose how deep this thing we're living in and on, and the whole thing series, it's not just one thing. I mean, when you started, we all went, yay, it's flat. And then after that, it's got all complicated. You think you knew the answer to everything and you didn't. It's just the beginning. Learning that it's flat is just the beginning, not the end.
Yeah, it's after discovering it's flat, okay, but then you come across the circle, what is just not correct, and you're getting immediately banned and then blocked, etc., just for asking how we can actually realize what it is then. And yeah, it's an obvious story of controlled opposition, which is there to prevent anyone to go from going anywhere further, just by deviating into the next lie. Okay. I mean, the ball is the lesser evil of the two, but yeah, it's still flat, and the sky just doesn't work on the ball.
I just think it's incredible, the amount of lies. Just absolutely incredible. New series, a couple of people, Z-Proxy and FPV, actually put a couple of videos which they're saying is relating to what you're talking about, and they're in the chat. Do you want to have a quick look?
Oh, you have to in the Hangout itself?
In the Hangout chat. Yes, Crown. My mum and dad still believe planes went into the Twin Towers. She's saying my mum still believed 9/11 was terrorist because she saw it on the news. Hey, hello, Stan.
That video doesn't exist because it's.
Says I agree with series.
You only copied the text and not the link.
Oh, I copied the whole thing that they sent me. Who's that?
No,
Z Proxy. Z Proxy,
Yeah.
send it again.
You copied the text and not the link. It's the link itself is what do you call that? Z Proxy.
Z Proxy, send it again.
I have it.
Oh, I see. Cool, it's that one, right?
Once upon a time, I was. There was no one who knew that I was, but I was. I liked to make myself into different shapes. Everywhere I looked, there was only me. I must be very big. I played by myself for ages. Then I started to get lonely. I wanted someone else to play with, someone who wasn't me. So I took a deep breath, gathered all my strength together, and squeezed really hard. I started to feel dizzy. It felt like I was falling. And all of a sudden, in a big burst, I became something else. This was so much fun. I did it again and again, lots of different ways. I do it all the time now. I can become all kinds of things. Things that grow, swim, crawl, fly, and run. One day, I squeezed extra hard. I pushed, and I pushed, and I pushed, and all of a sudden I became you. What is this thing I'm in? Only one moment ago, I was so big, and now I'm so little. It's like I'm all wrapped up in love. But as soon as I become you, you forget that you're me. In time, you forget all about me. Every so often, you wonder who you are. And I'm right here, reminding you. I like it best when you discover me. When we play together, you and I. And sometimes, you realize that you are me. Sometimes you forget that everything else is me too. even then, I still love you. Little me.
Oh, thank you, Z Proxy. I nearly had a tear in my eye through the whole thing.
Only titles, eh?
Yep. What about you, series? I said nearly had a tear in my eye.
Good stuff, this. Good vibes. No, the Witchers.
Thank you, Z Proxy.
Yeah.
Series. I've tried to get the link back from FPV, and it's the same link he keeps sending, so you can't press the.
Yeah, you need to copy the link itself instead of copying the text.
Did you hear that, FPV? Oh, is this it?
No, when you pass the link, you need to copy it with copy link instead of copy text.
So what are we watching now then? We were looking at this the other day.
Yeah, the Watchers.
What's that supposed to be again?
Venus or something?
Yeah, that's FPV's one.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be Venus.
Disappears for
Ooh, ah.
Then take it from a plane.
I suppose as we're on this and it's a consciousness evening, does anybody else in the chat room have any small videos, a couple of minutes long or something, that are precious to their hearts that you want series to play? Link through. That's amazing about Venus, isn't it? Like when you capture it like that, maybe, oh, wow. Well, I've taken some pictures of weird things in the sky. Great series, is it finished? Oh no, it's still going. Is it finished now, series? Oh no, that's still there. Just if everybody can see that. Whoa. What do you think of that then, series, or Patricia? Patricia, what do you think of that?
I'm like, wow. So that's just one star zoomed in. Is that, am I getting it right?
Yeah.
That is, wow.
Bit freaky.
Yeah.
It's not the Klingon ship, is it?
Klingon. Sorry. Forgot my mic was on. Oh, dear.
I think that when you've got like these energies up there, that they may look like that on a camera somehow. So magnetic stuff going on, isn't there, all the time?
I once Googled what makes a star twinkle, and they said it's because it's the air passing through it and the clouds and that. And when you look at that, you're like, yeah, right, that makes a lot of sense. That does. The amount of stuff that they tell us when we just accept it because we don't know any different. We've not, you know, we're not scientists. We're not people with big, massive telescopes and things like that. And we've give our power away to all these scientists. And what, you know, people saying, oh, the scientists say this, and it's about us looking at it ourselves and coming to our own conclusions. It's not, it shouldn't be about someone else doing it for us. We should all do it ourselves. And this is what I love about this group. We're all doing that, exactly that.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I'll shut up now.
I like it when you talk, Patricia. Our Patricia might be a bit quiet on these hangouts, but when she's got something to say, it's usually got a punch to it. Have you finished then, Patricia?
Oh, yeah, I think I've finished.
Series, Z Proxy sent another link afterwards to watch. It's in the chat room. That was a bit mind-blowing, whatever that is. But when I tried to capture this thing in the sky, whatever it was moving. It just looked really weird. It was going too fast at too low a thing, but I managed to, because I was out doing something anyway with my camera, so I managed to click a few pictures and it just turned into these weird objects, all like symbols and stretching and doing these cross things, and it was all really weird.
See proxy had a link again.
Yeah, the last one series.
Yeah, it's weer a partial link. Yeah.
Wow, look at that. What is that? Transformers, robots in the sky.
Come on, Karen, I'm sure you can sing better than that.
No, I'm not singing. No, I
It is fascinating. I mean, when you look at the
these
planet,
things are changing. They're changing though, Patricia. I don't remember many people a year ago filming things like that in the sky.
I don't remember seeing the moon a year ago, let alone stars like that. I'm like,
For me,
I'm lucky to see.
the moon's come up quite north for me tonight.
British
That's the
detective.
most north I've seen it in a long time. Not that I've seen it
So
that much either.
that's taken with the P900 then. I'm definitely getting one.
From a plane, eh?
Oh, from a plane. Oh, okay. I can't get myself a plane, but I can get a P900. At least I can see the moon a bit closer, I suppose. I'm just fascinated. I think it's.
I mean, that star's really close then. For the P900 to pick it up. If I just say that Z proxy, the whole link didn't come through, so series can't pick it up. It's only half a link to the last one.
Karen, it's you. The chat
Me?
only. The chat only shows the link partially.
Oh, I see. It's me copying the link from.
You need to copy specifically the link itself. As text, and that's how you do it.
Okay, series. Let me go back up and see if I can copy it differently.
I have it already in the chat.
Series has done it for me.
If you have a golf ball size consciousness, when you read a book, you'll have a golf ball size understanding. When you look out, a golf ball size awareness. And when you wake up in the morning, a golf ball size wakefulness. But if you could expand that consciousness, then you read the book, more understanding. You look out, more awareness. And when you wake up, more wakefulness. It's consciousness.
You waiting up for me, Daddy? Told you I'd be home before dark.
Westville.
Found us in the field today.
It's time to wake up.
Have you ever seen anything like this place?
Doesn't look like anything.
See?
You can't handle the truth.
It's time to wake up.
Chat room. That was the proxies work in there, or Stan's work.
Very well.
No, I think you're correct. Most people can't handle the truth.
The electric currents are responsible for some of the surface formations that we see on some of the planets and moons in our solar system, more specifically Earth, Mars. There are two main types of electric current that we'll be studying in this video. One being atmospheric electricity, which is electric current that travels from the atmosphere to the ground. The other being telluric currents, which is electricity that travels through the Earth's crust and seawater. The primary source of energy we'll be using in this video is a neon sign transformer, which is rated at 12,000 volts. And in the first experiment, we will apply this voltage to a piece of wood. In this case, it's a pine board. And we have the boards up, and we have to use a solution of mixed salt water, roughly about 25 to 1, depending on type of salt that you use. This is Dead Sea salt and tap water. And we'll see what happens. As you can see, the filament race out in different directions, finding the path of least resistance until they connect. Once that connection is made, you will continue to see the carbonization of one path across the board, which that current found to be the least resistant path. We turn the current off, you immediately notice that. But we can also observe the formation of what report in grand detail.
Show it again.
Okay, in this segment, we'll be taking a look at the atmospheric side of the equation. There are two main types of atmospheric discharge. One, everybody I'm sure is aware of, is the arc discharge, which is lightning. And there's another type of atmospheric discharge called electrostatic discharge. This has been recently posted in our news as you can look it up as dark lightning. However, it all depends on the amount of energy and the duration of the event as to what will form on a surface. Now here we have a setup. I got a little actuator table set up to move the base plate back and forth. This is just an iron plate set on top of a neoprene block. And in order to get a static electrostatic charge and not an arc discharge, you need some sort of dielectric material or a dielectric barrier. Look that up. This is just an insulated material such as this plastic, or in this case we'll be using sand in most of these experiments. And sand is dielectric. However, electricity will still flow through it. It's just at a very restricted rate. Its resistance is very high. So the first test we'll do is take, again, we'll have a piece of plastic on top of this iron. The iron's grounded, and then the electrode, this spoon, is the other lead. We'll place a small amount of sand in the center. Adjust the electrode, and where it almost touches. And we'll just turn the power on wide open, and you'll watch what it tries to do. This is what we'll be monitoring at a much closer angle. But as you can see, you get a separation, which is indicative of electric discharge, that where you have material being ejected in two directions, and nothing is literally being ejected in the opposite perpendicular directions. The next test we'll look at, we'll remove the plastic, and we'll go ahead and add a whole tableful of sand here. And this creates a dielectric barrier which will allow an arc to form. We only use the electrostatic discharge. Let's smooth that out in a little trial against a smooth surface. Set that spoon down. And I'm going to show you a few of these from above, and then we'll move that camera down at a much steeper angle, straighter angle to see these. We turn it on, let it set for a few minutes. We'll be able to observe what this creates. And again, we'll look at these in slow motion and much closer with high resolution. Turn it off. And if you can see that, we'll turn the light over on it. See if you can catch that, that bullseye crater there. It was formed in the center of the sand. More of a crater and a crater and a crater formations. Okay, so let's move the camera down and get some closer looks at these with different electrodes. And now we have this camera zoomed in extremely close. I'll be able to adjust the current flow here as we move. As soon as I turn this on, we'll notice in the center, when everything clears up, we have these pillars, particles that are magnetically attracted to the spoon, and they're lined up in, you know, almost, well, we'll see the almost perfect cubical columns, granule columns up here.
Wow.
And we can almost stop this in its tracks. If we turn the current down, we'll see that the attraction still remains fairly strong. And these they'll start to fall apart as I turn it down lower and lower. And when we get the current turned all the way off, the entire discharge is finished. And we'll see formation that occurs under the discharge area. So it's turned loose then. And so if we move the spoon, you see what happens. You see what we have left. Now let's do this on a little bit larger or wider angle or a wider discharge area. Let's set that up. It says we have a copper plate, a little wider discharge area mounted over the dielectric medium, the same. We'll go ahead and turn on the current. And we'll immediately see many particles attracted to the plate, and they dance around into almost, they'll almost appear as granular columns, stacked grains of sand. If we slowly decrease the current, catch them dancing around, try to zoom in, that's what we're going to get. And then if we turn the current off, and everything kind of sits in place, and you can imagine if they were scaled up, we'd have incredible amounts of heat. It would almost form these long, tall structure. And then, of course, afterwards, what we end up with is, you know, an entire area of peaks, valleys. And in my mind, this could very well be responsible for a lot of the formations seen on planets and moons. In this segment, we'll be using high-speed footage, which I went uploaded and we do on screen capture because it doesn't record audio. And here we have an iron electrode, a single iron electrode over the same iron plate we've been using before. It's a little different medium. This medium is a mixture of flour and aluminum at about 100 to 1. The source of power we'll be using for this experiment is a 19 million volt handheld taser, which produces a substantial spark or bolt of energy, which we will see when I turn the video on. The ting prod digging process that certainly could be responsible for a lot of the craters that we think are impact craters, and this could have some implications with volcanic activity as well. As we've seen in previous videos, you don't necessarily have to have the plasma light in order to evacuate material. Now we're going to do a little bit of comparison. These bullseye craters a number have been discovered on our moon. There are actually a few of them on Earth. This one in particular is in Russia, called Potomsky crater. And of course, we can recreate that relatively quickly on the lab. We can take a look at some other evidence we have for formation process. Devil's Tower in Wyoming, you can see the linear stacking of material is just as we do in our other experiments here in the lab. This can also be looked at a little closer, and you can see with this is salt, grains of salt that are stacking up just like they are on the Devil's Tower. So in my opinion, yes, electricity does have a major effect on surface formation. and there'll be a lot more to learn more now that we know what to look for.
Yeah.
So having said that, peace and love. Big heads up.
Ah, series. What was the link for that? Because Paul, a bad Christian, wanted to know what it was. Which one were we watching? Is it in the chat?
Just it here.
Oh, you've done it. You've done it, series. Hmm. Well, it's very interesting too.
Of what we figured out in the meanwhile here. I'm actually at the moment working out a magnetical map, and it seems to go 1,000 miles up. And I'm trying to get a kind of three-dimensional image of 10-kilometer layers. See what that shows up.
Oh, you're talking about the weathers thing series.
No, the magnetical data.
Right.
Through the air and probably even the land itself. So you can actually see what the polarities are and the actual elevation are. But for now, I'm just getting a simple grid of just the whole world per pixel per 10 kilometers, a layer up to 1,000 kilometers.
Right.
Yeah, it's again a huge amount of data, but to actually animated in 3D.
Another project then series.
Yeah, it seems to never end actually. There's so much more to actually overlay and see how the relations are. I mean, if you have all these platonic layers, then yeah, the only way to see it at work is when you actually have all the data of all the platonic layers instead of the isolated data, and then figure out what how the relation is, which you just can't see because you have only one layer of one type of data. And if you put in the elevation, the colors of the map, the magnetical data, the wind data, if you put everything together, you can actually see how the dynamics works visually. And out of that, you can actually extrapolate what is happening. Actually researching what the data says, what the reality is in that sense. I mean, it can talk for itself. We only have to watch it and listen, figure out what it says. And all that battling of oh, it says this, no, it says that. Yeah, it's like, yeah, he farted, no, he burped, no, he farted, no, he burped. It's so irrelevant of. They never talk actually of what he actually said. It's all a deviation from the actual focus of what the point is there.
Yeah, finding out what we really live on, you mean? Everything's got like everything's so hard to get to and nothing's put together.
Yeah. We can do it ourselves, and yeah, they won't do it for us. So we have to. If you want something, you have to do it yourself. You can't go to somebody else and do it for me. Yeah, maybe if you have a lot of money to spend, but then it's still a question of what are you going to do with the information, because are you actually realizing you are that particular responsibility of your own universe, or are you still trying to be ignorant of the actual law of existence? It's just, yeah.
Well, actually, not everybody can do what you do, series.
No, I have just my road. I happen to have a love for actually computers and graphics. And in the meanwhile, I've learned all kinds of stuff, what's kind of related and completely something else. But yeah, that 9/11 stuff was the beginning of actually the wake up of what the reality of the world actually is. The truth of the lies, in that sense. To find out that you don't even know the truth of the truth. And then that becomes the journey, in that sense.
Well, somebody usually thinks they know better than that one, don't they?
Sorry?
Somebody usually thinks they know better.
Well, yeah, explain it. I mean, there's nothing to battle about. You have your vision, I have my vision, and they're both true. We just don't seem to realize how we can work together in a syncretic sense, in that we actually look at the same thing, but from a different angle. And that's the only difference. And if we put the whole circle together, we can actually observe the whole point instead of only one angle. There's so many angles of any point we can discuss. I mean, probably as many as there are people to talk about it. And I can only tell what I see. And somebody else can see it also. That's the only thing I'm asking. Can you see it or can't you see it? Agreeing or disagreeing, it's no point. I mean, I'm seeing it anyway. It's the question, can you see it? And mostly it's this kind of a cognitive dissonance of a total confrontation they never will take in that sense.
Well, that's because you started off, like we said, just thinking, oh, it's flat, and it just leads to many different avenues, doesn't it, series?
Yeah, learning never stops, not even after you're dead.
Okay. Once we're here, we're here. Even if we go, we're still here.
Yeah, it's an illusion to think that when you have an education, you know it all. You're just knowing a grain of sand of the whole ocean of sand. I mean, we'll never know the whole ocean in this life. Maybe tap into it to kind of understand a direction of where you were meant to go, in a sense of why you came here, by realizing who you are and where you are, and know what you came to do here. In a sense, astrology just explains it in a kind of energetical way of how it will occur, on how the bigger waves are actually working, all the waves of the energies of all the planets and all the stars and all the houses, and what the energies on the earth itself is. I mean, yeah, it's all energetical. It's energy all around, no matter how dense you make it to matter or something. It's all music.
Music.
That's probably why I like singing then, because, well, I say singing. Sounds like a cat's being throttled. But I can't live a day without a bit of music playing somewhere, or me singing. Just sort of throw that in.
Me the other way around. I can't have a day without a moment of silence to actually think, to actually hear the music of the universe itself, instead of kind of forced sound out of probably the 440 hertz, what just makes it unable to think for yourself.
Yeah, we're supposed to be listening to the rustle of the trees.
I want to hug a tree.
Yeah.
I've hugged some trees before. It's great.
Yeah,
I've screamed at a tree, but I've never actually hugged one.
Really old trees, you know, big old trees. Great to go and give a hug.
I think I'm going to make that my next
Hug a
season before I get a P900. I've got a bucket list as long as my arm.
I've seen a tree being scraped off its bark by a lightning strike from 5 meters away. Well, it was pretty pretty hard sensation in that sense. Pretty shocking.
Those last night when Robert Kidner was playing those video with the lightning strikes. Was this what happened before when we got those big electrical strikes? They were just big versions of them.
Yeah, it's all the same stuff, but doing in small experiments to actually repeat the same principle of what has happened in the past, but then on a way bigger scale. And apparently, I kind of avoided information of the Thunderbolts group of the Electric Universe. It's so pointing to how things are working, and yeah, they really do their best to keep us from waking up. You can see how hard they do their best and how powerless they actually are. What efforts they have taken to even make us think they are an authority, while they're not. They just stole the pen of your own life's book. And we are.
Well, sometimes I think that they're more advanced than they say they are, and other times I think, well, you know, like for instance with this hurricane, why didn't they use the HARP thing to actually move it out of the way and save people's lives?
Well, I can only.
They've got it.
The outcome is the intention. So yeah, no matter how good we think in doing things for the world, there's guaranteed somebody actually thinking 180 degrees the other way around. In a way, that polarity has to exist, otherwise you won't even see the difference.
I mean, what about all those seas disappearing, those bays disappearing? Like, did big water, like waves come? How, anybody in the chat room who's American, how's it all going in America?
It seems to be finished and not even have damaged a lot of something. Where is it? I was
just frightened it was going to be like an angle grinder going through America. We'll have to wait for the chat room to catch up a little bit.
Sure, what is the time?
I just thought after watching, I was absolutely afraid for everyone that nearly every American you talk to says they're fine.
I've been.
Pardon?
It's 12. No, it's 1 o'clock here, so that's 12 GMT plus 1 minus 5. 7.
Oh, Paula Bad Christian says the hurricane is affecting the weather all along the eastern edge.
Here, yeah, the center was here, but I saw that most of the wind came from the east coast. And then the west coast was pretty clear from wind, actually.
Oh, what's going on?
It has turned down a lot.
Well, it has, hasn't it? Oh, thank goodness. It's not picking up again.
No.
Did they get 30-foot waves like they predicted? Can disappear and come back without great, catastrophe then. I mean, where does this water go?
There are only high winds. The ground winds are completely dissipated in quality.
Well, is that more hurricanes then?
No, it's just high air. This is 10 meters above ground. This is 3 kilometers above ground. So you see the high winds, but then when you go 12 kilometers, you will see all the high winds of 12 kilometers high. 12 kilometers. And I can go only 10,000 kilometers.
Has anybody noticed? Fine.
Noticed what?
It's all straight line, isn't it? It's not round or anything.
It's around one of the South River here and one of the South River there.
I can see that. I meant the weather front itself, like how the clouds go and the weather fronts. It's all straight across.
Here is this northern thing where you have this, and then there the other probably. It's kind of magneticals. The north is a little bit, how do they say that? The south is very grounded, but the north is kind of the tree growing outwards, spreading a little. So the fields are bigger or something. Kind of can see that. But anyway, the big tornado.
Series quite like that, don't you, Series? Now you found that.
Yeah, it shows a lot of what is happening. Only up till 12 kilometers. But it's at least updating and such, and yeah, you can see how it moves. And in a way, it's always the question how you can get it in your own model to actually trace a full year or something. And then with all the data, including the winds, the magnetics, together with the elevation and temperatures of water and air. It's all connected to each other.
It is amazing on this map that they're showing the weather front like above Russia there. Above Russia, do they?
No, not really. It's all within the main UTM square. You have the square and you can't go beyond the latitude to 85. And thus you miss the information what is going outside there, because this is no way connected as a single pixel. And for the same, there's just a complete square beyond this. But yeah, get the data. Although somehow you should expect that everything outside.
Series eats data, don't you, Series? You eat data.
Yeah, kind of. My servers do.
Are you a little Pac-Man then, Series?
Oh, I don't know if he likes that word very much.
sorry, don't fall out with me. No, I look at these maps and I look for England, and you know I can't see it. I know roughly where it is. Yeah, thank you. But I'm like, it's so small compared to everywhere else. But we're pretty much smack dab in the middle, aren't we?
This is the middle of the map, London. And let it up in longitude at least.
Oh yeah, because it starts from London, doesn't it, with Greenwich Mean Time?
Yeah, this is where the latitude 0 goes from top to down, exactly through London, at longitude 0.
And gives us the same time zone as Lagos in Africa.
Kind of.
Apparently, we're going to have some bad weather as well here.
Oh,
Not sure if these time zones are not just simply
What does that mean then?
related.
Well, the area where I live up, you'd say north. I mean, for where you are, Karen, everything above you is north, but I'm sort of like North Lincolnshire, all that area, and Yorkshire and that is going to have really bad weather, lots of wind and rain. I thought, well, it's not unusual there, is there really? We always get really bad weather, but apparently it's going to be bad until Wednesday.
You can see
I
that
think,
you get a mix from Greenland and from America. Although still Greenland. On two sides, yeah, and that's going over England all the time. And you can play it.
I'm loving the colours on there. I want that printed out and put on my wall. I think it's lovely. I'll shut up now anyway.
Oh, Patricia. Well, Siri started looking at this yesterday, didn't you, Siri, or the day before?
Yeah, a few days ago I saw it in a video somewhere and managed to find the website.
Is it this that you want to put into Blender into a sort of little video then?
Yeah, well, three-dimensionally then.
Yeah.
And it's kind of figuring
Everybody
out.
watch. Series wants to turn this into a 3D model so that we can really see what their information says.
Yeah, different heights, kind of like these, what is it, plasma tubes they talk about. It's all a big magnetic structure, and they all have they can show you the lines between just above here, a little bit of Greenland, and then just a little bit of Antarctica, and that's it between there, and they don't give you more. And I figured actually how you can get this information beyond even this main square up to the latitude 90. Same as the elevation data. So I will figure out the magnetical values of the elevations the same.
You were a bit shocked to see that the winds were so high, so far up, weren't you?
Yeah, this extreme height and then these extreme winds. Well, I figure we can know why we have certain satelloons over the world all the time. Although you might think that a particular position like this here would be nice. Would be nice to actually have a static position. It seems to be an electromagnetic effect here. Not sure if it actually changes.
What about that one on your bedroom wall, Patricia?
What you say?
Would you like that one on your bedroom wall?
Who said out about my bedroom wall? I'm having it in my front room. I
don't know why I said that. You're not a teenager, are you?
Although my colours in my bedroom are purple and lime green, so I think that might go quite nice. Yeah. Oh dear. I've hardly got anything.
I think Sirius is
double function here.
Sirius just feels that he wants to put this together so that everybody can see all the information together.
In 3D.
In 3D.
Because that's how it is. And not 2D.
It's fascinating. Do you know, I was thinking yesterday, I actually was thinking today as well, but I was thinking yesterday, and I probably think tomorrow as well. But anyway, What happened to California and the tectonic plates? Don't hear anything about them anymore, do we?
What? That it's going to be a big earthquake in half of America, half of California. It's going to fall into the sea.
I mean, heaven forbid. I wouldn't want anything like that to happen, but I'm just thinking it's all about tornadoes and hurricanes and that sort of thing. I mean, I don't know how often they happen, so I don't really look at things like that. It's only recently. I was just thinking about it the other day. I thought, oh, they've had earthquakes in Mexico. I'm very rubbish at geography, so I don't know where all these places are, to be honest, but I don't know. Anyway, that was my bit of thinking yesterday. Getting quite good at this, actually.
Series, will you put it over England and Holland? Because this looks like maybe how I could get to you in half an hour. Because it's in one of those.
It could be.
Yeah, look.
But then. Yeah.
Is that how I got to you in half an hour?
I can't check it because the time isn't there, but this seems pretty obvious. I don't know how you're flying, but this seems to speed up a little. Not very much.
Because it's still just really strange that I could fly from Southend to, how do you say your place where you live?
Groningen.
Yeah, which is about where he's put the 72 miles an hour. From there to there is about 400 and something miles, and I did it in about 35, 40 minutes in a little propeller plane.
Yeah, and it took longer to travel from the airport to my house and to get from your house to the airport.
And yet I went whoosh, almost in a blink of an eyelid. Ding, 400 and something miles in just over 30. And when we came back, we made up time as well. The stewardess said, I think we're going to be half an hour going back as well. So it must be something to do with the winds, but I just can't see how. I'm so glad there wasn't bad turbulence, because I'd be going, I want to get out, because it isn't very big, the plane. No one could quite work out how we could get over was it 450 miles series?
522 miles. If
yeah, because it's going from Southend, and then because of where.
Yeah, it's 305 miles, and 305 miles divided by 35 seconds times 60 minutes times 60 minutes is 522 miles in an hour.
So it was kilometers, it's that, but miles it's 300 and something, but I still quite a lot to do in 35 minutes. Yeah, that means that we should have been going whoosh. Anybody see my little video with that funny propeller thing on it? Oh my goodness.
Karen, you don't need to get a plane next time. I'll just tie a load of balloons to you and just.
Yeah, let's get an umbrella or something. Book a ride. Yeah. It's only half an hour, isn't it?
Through France. Over what is it?
When I came back, I came through it came through the land back, but when I flew, it went across the sea.
Oh, with 50 miles an hour. 90 miles.
Well. Yeah, we were 20,000 feet, whereas I'm used to flying aeroplanes at 36,000 feet. That was a bit strange, only doing 20,000 feet. It still looked quite high in aeroplane up. We weren't almost on the ground, but that's still quite a distance different to the other planes. My first experience on a propeller plane. Anyway, we have been going for 3 hours now. Is there any like questions from the chat room or any other little videos anybody'd like series to play, or any videos on consciousness? I mean, we played a bit of mine on the conscious. I played it to you privately, didn't I? You could always listen to him a little bit if you wanted. About reality's inside your head, not outside your head. What do you reckon, series?
I kind of figure reality is in and inside and outside. But the distraction from it is mainly inside your head.
You think it's going on outside your head, but it's not. It's actually going on inside your head.
Yeah. The kingdom is outside and inside. It's everywhere.
I'm not even sure if we've played it, to be honest. The one with the lady talking about the different people that have been sent here.
Yeah, several times in several hangouts, I guess.
I like the little thing. Oh, sorry.
Go on, carry on.
I like the golf ball analogy, saying that you know, you just see that little bit. So if you expanded your brain big enough, you could actually get inside it. Because a golf ball would become the little bubble that we live in, which is inside, isn't it?
Yeah. To go outwards is to go inwards.
It's like turning your whole body inside out and actually, I mean, it'd be a bit gruesome looking, but it's that idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of what I say with that you have the roots in heaven.
That's going into a different dimension as well. If you do that, twist yourself inside out.
In a sense, you're growing outside of heaven into the world.
I said I should do a Mary Poppins to Holland.
It's opposite as a tree, and the tree roots out of the earth into the heavens, but we are actually rooted in the heavens, rooted of growing into the world and walking on the earth in that sense. Principle is the other way around.
Ah, yeah.
It's from
So originally we were in heaven, whatever people want to make of that, and we're really just gone out of my head now. So Karen, just if you do get your umbrella and you go with the wind speeds and that, make sure I've got my P900 first, and I'll sort of take shots of you going across.
Plus, I'll have to have my feet pointing out like hers do. Hasn't her shoes got little round things on the end or something? Her feet are quite like, she sticks her feet out when she's like up with her umbrella. They're sticking out. I have to remember that.
Are you going to wear a long black coat then? And
I might not do that because I might go, oh, look, there's I'm flying past in the jet stream.
A little carpet. Have a little carpet bag.
Oh yeah, I love that film. I watched that with my granddaughter. She loved that film. But now when you watch them, they've got some horrible ideas behind them, haven't they? Really, Disney after all. But she loved that, watching like half a house coming out of the bag.
Yeah, I used to love Bed Knobs and Broomsticks. I used to love that film.
I've watched the Wizard of Oz and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but the Wizard of Oz now has like horrible connotations, and there's someone supposed to be hanged in it. And you think, oh, I just wanted to watch a film with my granddaughter. Didn't realise every time I was watching a hanging as well.
Yeah, but what story of the illusion are you gonna watch? Or are you actually realizing what the truth is of it? You know? Same as Santa says, give me any fairy tale and I will explain it through astrology. Because it's all astrology and connected through the body system of yourself. I mean, your spine is the ladder to walk, or the what is it? Hansen is beans. The beans into the clouds to the
Oh,
giants.
Jack and the Beanstalk.
Jack and the Beanstalk, and the goose with the golden eggs.
Thing you've got
It's
to get
all-
into now is all the fable things, is all the, all those things which you thought were sort of past little things. Those are the things you need. You need all the, I can't remember what they're called now, folklores. You need all these things. They're the truth.
Yeah, but then so disguised through confusion that we
I know,
don't
I said,
realize. No.
sorry, series. I said a while back I was looking into myths and folklore because I wanted to see what the connection was. And you know how most sort of stories or fables or whatever you want to call them have they say what's the moral sort of thing that you get from that. And the moral thing is, don't believe it, just look even deeper. I suppose if you got anything, a bit of writing and changed it round and did the like a Da Vinci Code type thing. I was watching a thing about him today actually, about how he mirrored things to put pictures and things, and I just thought, oh, I can't sort of look at this at the minute. But you could take anything and change it into a different code, but does that mean that that code is a universal code that everyone will understand? Or I don't know where I'm going with this. I start stuff and then I'm like, I can't remember where I'm going. I don't get to speak to many people. Help me.
You do really well then, Patricia.
Oh, I had a conversation with my son a few weeks back, and I could talk to him, but then because I just listen to myself and I think, Pat, where are you going? What are you trying to say? Oh dear, forgive me.
No,
But
you're doing really
anyway,
well.
about the folklores and the thing, I came across about a stone. I'm trying to think what it's called now. Adder stone. And how in different sort of religions and folklore and that it was used for different things and it had different meaning. But I remember when I joined the Mormon church that we were taught about the prophet Joseph Smith, that he had what was called a seer stone, and he used to get the knowledge to translate the golden plates. Now, if you look at that from a distance, you go, what the heck? But because you transformed into the church without really questioning it, we get this feeling that it's the right thing to do. You know, it's just quite a strong feeling, but it's the spiritual side of it that you join in for. It's not you've got to do this, or, they don't tell you you've got to do it. They say there's a consequence if you don't. Well, I'm quite a stubborn person. I think, well, I don't want to be told what to do. I'm getting too old to, worry about stuff like that. I don't want to be told I'm bad for smoking or drinking tea and coffee and all that blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So that's why I left the church.
All that sin stuff. All that sin stuff. That's what I can see with all that religion. They kind of stole the truth, as in the babies, and they completely made the bathwater dirty with the lie of their authority over that truth, and make you kind of addicted to the authority instead of the actual knowledge of the truth. They keep you as far as possible from that actually truth, because just read the Bible from cover to cover and make up your own mind in that sense, and take a while to actually do it, because there's so much in there, and there's so many levels in there as well, as in precept on precept and line on line. here or there, here a little, there a little, so that it may be broken and snared. It's so obvious. And what they do is actually prevent those who are actually, because of this authority-like trauma, in a sense, people develop their ego to actually protect themselves against this trauma. And they throw away the baby with the bathwater because of that they claim the ownership of it. So by throwing away the religion, they actually throw away the truth as well. And yeah, then it becomes a bit harder to actually get back to the truth, because it's all it's for the collective mind level a cage, but for the ego actually a cure to get out of the level of the inside no against the outside forced yes of that fake authority, and get to the next level, in the universal level of the yes against the one thing what they will never demand from you, and that is that you actually take responsibility of your own freedom, to get to the full yes against life itself in an unconditional sense, and get out of get over the ego level as well. The ego level is very hard needed. The better the stronger the ego, the better, because the stronger the no, the stronger the yes will be. But you have to come to the yes, and many are actually getting crazy in a level that they can't find the door to that, and they only can fall back, and they can't fall back on a collective level, so they will fall back even lower, back to the child level. And yeah, then they're far away from actually becoming the master of it. And the master level is the complete awareness, and the child level is just the unawareness, but as pure as the master is, just not contaminated with the mind in that sense. And the mind is only the ladder between the unconscious and the conscious. And it's meant to actually walk it to the other end, and not to stay your whole life on that ladder in the mind. And when you are in your master level, you're actually living. That's the purest level of living you can get, and most aware level.
I suppose it's how it is in the mind then, isn't it?
Yeah, stuck in the mind. You can't go back, and you can't find the door forward. That's where many people are stuck in. And then the most subtle way to keep people there is actually by stroking that ego, giving them the title, giving the identity, giving them the belonging to the group, giving them the top job, etc. The smarter they are, the more they will be distracted with all these strokings, because they're so good for this world, in that sense. And they never come further. They just are stuck there and think that life is. But there's so much more beyond there. And the old masters have told this because they actually reached it. And Osho described the ladder of the mind actually as a kind of pyramid forming, where you have the base of the child. The first step is the collective step. That's the most widest step in the ladder. And then you have the ego step that is kind of half of that size, so less people will be there. And then you have the universal step, and even less than half of that it's even less than half of what the ego level reaches. And then you have the top of the pyramid, what actually touches the plane of the master. Barely any individual will actually reach a particular pyramid top of awareness. And yeah, a human knows actually 3 times in his life, and that is the time of the innocence, the time of the guilt, and the time of the reshit. And that last time is that particular level of the universal step in where you actually learn how to grow yourself into the flower you are, and then be the master and teacher in that sense, because that's what we do for everyone, to actually bring them from child level up to the master level, to get to know yourself, the higher self. The whole meaning of life is to get the most high of to get to the most high of yourself, the awareness. It's the consciousness. What is the evolution in that sense? I agree with that, with Itzhak Bentov. It's the only thing what evolves.
But imagine the consciousness together.
So when you say higher, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So when you say higher self, do you think that's where they're trying to tell us that we're not the higher self? They, you know, like the government and these people that think they're better than us. Instead of saying
between you and your most high self as an authority, external, to control you. And you believing it is actually making their dream happen. So you would become practically a slave in a consent. And that's how it works, because as soon as you realize you are actually the master of your life, as soon as you realize what truth actually is, that you already have it, that the only way to recognize it is because you have it. It's like, it doesn't matter how old the dark is, the youngest light will dissipate it. And that's practically how powerful the wake up is to yourself. And that's why masters all say, wake up, know yourself, know thyself. It's all they say. All points to self. It's you who is in the middle of your universe. Even the sky and the land are two separate creations in where you are the center connecting it. Like you have your roots in heaven and you walk as a tree on the earth.
I know a lot of people say, oh, well, it's like my picture. It said, clear the fear, non-compliance. So basically, that's me saying to myself, I don't need anyone to tell me what to do, how to feel. I just need to learn how to live for me. Because what I do, if it feels right for me, then it's right for me. I forgot where I was going with this. But there's
you know, we've been mothers and we're kind of redundant now, and now instead of looking after all these other people, we have to sort of redefine it so that we're looking just after ourselves and having our own lives now. Income's flat earth as well at the same time. A bit like that, so we have to redefine it all now.
Flat earth came in at a great time for me, because basically I'd only got my youngest son living with me. I mean, he was 18 roughly at the time. No, 19, sorry. But I could concentrate on what I wanted to do. You know, I'm quite a stubborn person, you know, don't like being told what to do. And I looked into things and I thought, well, all right, you know, you see the YouTube videos, the next on the list, and there was one there that said flat earth. I went, oh, go on, I'll watch that. Something else to do. And within a minute of watching it, I thought, yeah, that's right. Because I knew I weren't on a spinning ball. Don't know what shape it was, but I knew I weren't on a spinning ball. It just made sense to me. And, well, here I am today talking to, well, probably everybody shut their ears now. Oh God, that Patricia's on. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say God.
Oh.
But
Yeah, she spoke.
I just love it though, because I've never really done this. I've spoke to my eldest son, but it's like, I've always wanted to be a tree. I wanted to rename myself Willow because I love willow trees, and that's who I feel I am. Anyway, I'll let you play this video now then.
Oh, what, is Siri's playing another one?
No,
I have every book ever published about the golden ratio, the golden section. Mark Livio's book, Geometry, Important Life, The Divine Proportion. Another book with the same title, The Divine Proportion. Why were the Pythagoreans so interested in the golden section? They were interested, obviously, in a complete grand unification of physics and metaphysics. We have two antinomies today that are dueling for the truth. We have nihilism or materialism, and of course we have the idiot creationist. One thinks that there is a being that sits up in the sky, and the other thinks that everything is simply a materialistic reduction of energy and particles and whatnot. The Pythagoreans unified physics and metaphysics, and believe it or not, the grand unified theory, which all modern scientists today believe is a divinely simplex equation, was, as rediscovered by me back in 2005, a very simplex equation. Now, as was proven in Plato's Republic 509d, that the divided line of Plato is phi, 1, 1, and 1 over phi, which altogether is phi. What does this have to do with the Pythagorean pentagram? Of course, we all know that this was the symbol of the incommensurability and unification of physics and metaphysics of the Pythagoreans. So what does this 108, 36, 36 isosceles triangle have to do with a grand unification of everything? As Plato and Plotinus and Pythagoras said, that everything is numbers, not literally in the materialistic sense, but we can deduce things about metaphysics and ontology from numbers. Therefore, we were able to see things existentially and able to work back and deduce things about the absolute, about the soul, about the noetic cosmos. The Pythagoreans were not interested in the golden section, as every book out there about the golden section is. It's just a bunch of pretty picture books about the plant phyllotaxis, and usually it is a nautilus shell, and then fabulous spirals is found in nature and life, and of course you see the self-made tapestry and the various books written by Philip Ball. All this is great and is beautiful, is wonderful. We will see symmetry, like the vertical versus the horizontal, the spiral of DNA. All this, of course, is in a ratio of 1 to 5. The Pythagoreans, the Platonists, the Neoplatonists were not interested in the existential beauty of the Fibonacci sequence, i.e. the golden ratio, or dividing Plato's divided line in the extreme and mean ratio. They're not interested in the existential nature of the golden section. They're interested in using that to deduce what the one is, both in principle and attribute, and say things about the ontological structure, mechanics, the clockworks of our cosmos. This, of course, is the basis, the isosceles triangle, the 108, 36, 36 triangle, as found in the pentagram. You see, it's the exact same triple triangle that embodies Plato's Republic 509d, but of course it does not belong to Plato. This came from the Pythagoreans. We only attribute it to Plato because it is the oldest existing source that we have in written form attributed to Plato in his Republic, was mirrored in the cave analogy and the sun analogy also in Republic. So what is this reducibly? Is there a grand unified theory for everything, both the cosmos, the mythos, and the cosmos, the ethos, both everything empirical and everything ontological, everything metaphysical? That the Pythagoreans have a simplex equation for this? Yes. As I discovered back in 2005, Plato's divided line, once again, is divided by phi, 1, 1, and 1 over phi, which, if taken all together, remember, both of these are 1. They have sloping angles of 1 and 1 with a base of phi. Phi reducible once again to phi 1, 1 over phi. All of this together, phi 1, 1 over phi, of Plato's divided line is a simplex equation. This is the equation, the grand unified theory of everything, according to the Pythagoreans, of visible and metaphysical, is 1 over 5 to the power of -3. This is literally the grand unified theory, according to the Pythagoreans, as I rediscovered in 2005. And this, of course, is a mathematical proof, and this is, of course, Plato's little secret in his Republic, and mentioned elsewhere, and actually speculated upon by Plotinus, Numenius, and all the ancient Neo-Pythagoreans and the Neoplatonists over time. But you will not find any mention anywhere until I rediscovered in 2005 what the grand unified theory of the Pythagoreans were. Is 1 over 5 to the power of -3, and everything taken in totality, which equals phi cubed. Phi cubed, of course, being 4.23606, etc., etc. Phi to the power of -3 is 0.23606, etc., etc. 1 divided by phi to the power of -3 is the grand unified theory of the Pythagoreans. This is not speculation. This is not conjecture. This is the proof, the mathematical proof that, amazingly enough, now that we've had nearly 2,000 years to look at Plato's divided line, was only recently proven a few years ago with absolute mathematical certainty that Plato's divided line is divided in the extreme and mean ratio of phi, 1, 1, and 1 over 5, which is the basis and the formation of the Pythagorean isosceles triangle, sloping angles of 1 and 1, base angles of 108, 36, and 36. This is the special isosceles triangle of the Pythagoreans, with a vertical of 1 over 5. Why does it occur here as opposed to directly at the midpoint? Because it has to intersect at the midpoint between 1 and 1. As a mathematical logical necessity, or as the Platonists would call it, anarchy. It intersects at 1 over 1. So what is the grand unified theory of the Pythagoreans? That we've actually been looking for the unification of the strong force, the weak force, the electromagnetic force, and of magnetism. And today we call it the GUT, the quest for the grand unified theory. Well, amazing enough, the Pythagoreans discovered it many thousands of years ago, and who knows who they got it from before them. We obviously have no written record, nor have a lot of conjecture about where it came from, really, the Pythagoras. But the grand unified theory, the quote-unquote supremely divine equation of the Pythagoreans is 1 over 5 to the power of -3, which forms the basis of the special Pythagorean isosceles triangle, which forms the basis of Plato's Republic 509d, 511, the divided line, which subdivides up into phi 1, 1, 1 over 5, with sloping angle of 1 over 5, which forms the basis of the isosceles triangle of sloping angles of 1, 1, and base of phi. It is amazing that this simplex equation, of which I have nearly about 250 pages of elaborations, proofs, detail upon detail upon detail, is why the Pythagoreans were so interested in the geometry and using it as a deductive metaphysical tool for understanding the mechanics of the universe. This proves, not in this short little pathetic video, but it proves that the idiocy that we debate over today versus the creationists and the materialists, the actual quote-unquote religion, but basically the metaphysics or the ontology of Pythagoreanism, Platonism, and Neoplatonism, which denied, by the way, outright in any translation that the absolute was being, i.e. God, is diametrically opposed to the idiocy of creationism, a la Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and the idiocy, the stupidity of pathetic materialism. It's unfortunately accurate and sad and true at the same time that the creationists have it half right and half wrong, and the materialists, the atomists, have it half right and half wrong. The materialists have it right that there's no God, there's no old guy sitting up in the clouds, and that everything existential, of course, is a bundle of wavefronts and atoms and so on and so forth, and that our universe, existentially and empirically so, is reducible to wavefronts, atoms, whatnot. It is also true and sad that the creationists have it right, that there is a metaphysics and ontology, a ratio, an actual soul that underlies the substrates of this empirical existence. But they are wrong, of course, that the basis for that is the proof of a God, a creator being. The Platonists and the Pythagoreans deny that the absolute was being. There's simplex equation for describing the entire cosmos, as proven by my discovery in 2005 of 1 over 5 to the power of -3, is simply this: the conservation of the logic, the mechanics of emanationism, which is the basis of everything that Plato, Plotinus, and Pythagoras taught, is one simple thing. Remember the sloping angles of the isosceles triangle, 1 and 1. What the absolute is and what it quote-unquote does cannot be differentiated. There is no argument for the complexity and the divinity as found in nature, both in macrocosmic, microcosmic world. The only contention is the source, the locus of the complexity and the beauty that we see in nature, the harmonies, the rhythms, the Fibonacci sequence that we see both the macro and the microcosmic world. Now, the idiot creationists think that the, of course, divine ratio that we see in the existential world is proof of God, and of course that is a lunacy, is a fallacy, is the inverse fallacy of identification, that as above, so below, therefore as below, therefore above. In other words, the being that we have here below is a reflection of the being that is above. Of course, that is idiocy. Great book to buy on proof against this, of course, is Philip Ball's book called The Self-Made Tapestry. The complexity we see in nature and proof of the Pythagorean metaphysics and the fact of emanationism and the simplex conservation of the mechanics of monism and Platonic emanationism, or protogos, is simply that what the absolute is and what it does cannot be differentiated. This is the absolute, the one, and what it does, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, applied to the power of -3. What the absolute is and what it does this mean. In other words, there is nothing in this world, or nothing that underlies the substrate to this world in metaphysics or existentialism, which does not have at least one attribute. What the absolute is and what it does are not differentiated. What the one is and what it does are the same thing. What the light is and what it does are one and the same thing, light and illumination. One does not differentiate light from what it does, like illumination, or does one differentiate illumination from light. This is, unfortunately, a very short video. It requires many hundreds of pages of discussions, and I cannot jam it all into a tiny little video. But basically, once again, the Pythagorean pentagram, taking it out of the hands of the unintelligent pagans, and I'm sure they're going to hate me saying that, and the pagans and the other lesser people taking the pentagram to the original source of Pythagoreans, forming the basis of Plato's divided line phi, 1, 1, and 1 over phi, Plato's divided line. We have the equation for the totality of everything in the cosmos, the cosmos of mythos and the cosmos of ethos, according to the Pythagoreans, phi, 1, 1, and 1 over phi, which is simply altogether, of course, phi, summed up in the simplex equation of 1 over 5 to the power of -3. And of course, I'll not be proven true in my lifetime, but the math is correct. But this literally is the grand for everything, as found out by the Pythagoreans, and who knows before them, thousands of years ago. This is literally the grand unified theory of physics and metaphysics, according to Pythagoras. As Pythagoras said, everything is numbers. Well, this was the number of Pythagoras. This was the harmony, the special quote-unquote secret of Plato, the secret that's hidden in both Plato's cave analogy, the secret that was hidden in Plato's divided line of Republic 590 to 511, Plato's sun analogy. It was also talked about by Plotinus. I've only uncovered this once again in 2005. And it's unfortunate that I don't have enough time, nor do you probably have the patience for me to go into all the details about this. Hopefully you'll discover further, like some future videos about this, and specifically about the Pythagorean pentagram and why this formed the symbol, the basis of all Pythagoreanism, because within it is the entire encapsulation of the physics, the metaphysics, and mechanics of everything that the Pythagoreans believed, taught, and found to be true, both about the metaphysics, the ontology, and the existential world. And it was the complete logical proof of everything, as opposed to creationism, and also as opposed to materialism. Thank you for your time, and next video we'll be talking about the pentagram of the Pythagoreans.
Whoa, series. Thanks for that. Good night.
math lessons at the end.
Cool.
But it's basically a little bit about the history, actually, of the whole Greek philosophy as such. Much there is actually hidden in there, and then kept on high level education, blah blah blah, within the concept of what they teach us. But yeah, I like
Well, I hope that helped everybody there.
was actually digging your stuff and digging it deeper and getting to way other conclusions than the official narrative tries to shove through our throats.
Everybody enjoyed a bit of Ken there.
Yeah, a little bit math.
Thank you, Series. Series, I think we should end very soon, but Crown put a link in the chat room. It's in the chat room. Very small video.
You know, they were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. CBS This Morning contributor Michio Kaku is a physics professor at City College of New York. Professor, nice to see you. Extraordinary seeing Al Gore and Bill Clinton there together with Charlie, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, they did not get into this discussion,
No.
though. But it is fascinating. I mean, lasers, really, to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as Mark Twain once famously said, everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far, it works. When you have water vapor and you have particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning. Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now. And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops? If they don't have it, there's the consequences of famine.
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
Incredibly interesting, Professor Michio Kaku. Thank you so much.
Well,
there you have it then. A weather moderate. I can't say the word now.
Modification.
Anyway, everybody knows what I mean. Yeah, that's it. Series, is there anything you want to add? Because we have been going for nearly 4 hours now. Very deep, intense hangout, guys. Masses of information.
Yeah, I had food enough.
Are you hungry?
I wonder how many are actually looking.
Still people with the series. It's never a quick hangout, is it, with us guys?
At least 6 others in the chat. Yeah, I guess tomorrow new day of food.
Everyday series.
What do we have tomorrow?
Tomorrow we have Mr. Thrive and Survive.
Okay, cool.
9 p.m. UK time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I would say big hugs.
Oh, we're going. Patricia, come back.
I haven't gone anywhere. Look at me hair.
And yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow with.
What are you doing, Patricia? I put the camera on you now. Never seen Patricia like that before.
I'm a master of disguise.
You can actually look through them.
I forget, what's that from? When with the hair all over his face in the kiddie film.
Is it It?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. You're an It.
Yeah.
I've got to put the camera back on, Patricia.
But anyway.
What?
Everybody.
With the camera.
And for the.
Series has got his glasses on. It won't go on to Patricia. Camera won't move. I'm trying to get Patricia's the It up. Series is still hugging. Anyway, yeah. Patricia, it's gone all slow. For everybody who managed to stay with this hangout and all that deep food to take in now, and thank you, series, for giving us the food. Masses of food, and thank you for the videos everybody put in as well, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Take your time. Yes. Take your time.
Love you all.
Pardon?
Take
Sorry,
your time.
series?
Digest the food.
Time to digest the food, or eat the food and digest the food. Anyway, big hugs. And we see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Love you all.
Bye.